Imagine you're only a baby, eyes barely able to focus, and yet something is already happening deep in your brain. Long before you can form a single word, you're absorbing an unspoken rule. When someone bigger, louder, or dressed in authority gestures, you respond. Researchers have shown that infants recognize power hierarchies simply by watching who yields in a conflict. This invisible lesson is the obedience installation protocol. It burrows so deep that decades later, you might feel your stomach knot when a uniformed stranger gives you an order, even if every instinct tells you it's wrong. Think of the famous Milgram experiment, where ordinary people shocked strangers because a man in a lab coat insisted. Their hands shook, their voices trembled, but still they obeyed. Your mind learned early that disobedience carries risk, that belonging depends on compliance. In classrooms, a raised eyebrow from a teacher could freeze your voice. At work, a supervisor's tone can make your heart race. This is not weakness. It's a primal survival strategy, a way to stay safe in groups. But awareness is your first defense. When you sense that automatic compliance rising, pause. Ask yourself whose interests you're serving. Is the command legitimate or just an echo of old conditioning? The obedience installation protocol can be unlearned, but only when you see it clearly for what it is. A reflex carved into you before you had any words to resist. Imagine locking eyes with a stranger across a crowded room. In that instant, your brain starts running a hidden protocol older than civilization itself. You think you're just looking, but in truth, your nervous system is reading subtle signals, calculating dominance, trust, and threat before your conscious mind even knows it's happening. Eye contact is one of the most powerful nonverbal commands ever discovered. It can freeze you, force a smile, or make you drop your gaze in submission. Studies have shown that when someone holds your stare for longer than a few seconds, your amygdala lights up like an alarm. This primitive fear response evolved to protect us from predators and social rivals. But it also means your brain can be hijacked by confident eye contact, especially in negotiations or arguments. In experiments, participants who received steady eye contact from authority figures were more likely to agree with statements they knew were false. Imagine the last time you felt cornered in a conversation, your heart rate climbing while you struggled to look away. That wasn't weakness. It was an ancient safety reflex trying to avoid conflict. The next time someone locks eyes with you and you feel yourself comply or freeze, remember, your brain is obeying an old survival code. Eye contact isn't neutral. It's a silent command that shapes your reactions before your thoughts even load. Once you see this, you can reclaim the choice to break the gaze and keep your mind clear. Imagine you're in an elevator with a stranger. You feel the impulse to step back, to shrink your body, to create space. This isn't politeness, it's the proximity submission reflex. Your brain has evolved to read invisible status signals in distance. Even before words existed, closeness meant dominance or threat. Stepping back was a survival code. In primate groups, lower-ranking members yield space to alphas without conscious thought. Your nervous system still carries this wiring. When someone you perceive as higher status enters your personal zone, your muscles tighten, your breath shortens, and you adjust your stance. You may not even notice. Think of how you behave when a powerful boss walks by compared to a child. You either contract or expand automatically. Space becomes a language your body speaks fluently. Researchers call this spatial encoding. Our brains assign social meaning to proximity. In experiments, subjects standing closer to authority figures reported feeling less agency. Their posture folded in small ways. This reflex happens in relationships too. A partner leaning in can trigger your need to step back if you sense a power imbalance. Crowded environments amplify this response, making you feel cornered. But awareness is power. Next time you step back without thinking, pause and ask yourself, whose rank am I reading? Whose approval am I anticipating? You don't have to surrender space unconsciously. When you claim your ground deliberately, you teach your nervous system a new story. That proximity can be chosen, not merely obeyed. What if the reason you keep returning to the same toxic habits isn't weakness, but biology. Imagine your brain as a prediction machine, constantly trying to reduce uncertainty. This is called the predictability preference loop. Even when something hurts you, if it's familiar, your brain codes it as safer than an unknown alternative. It doesn't matter if the unknown could improve your life. The familiar feels less risky because your nervous system has already mapped it. Think about staying in a job you hate or returning to a relationship that drains you. Part of you knows it's harmful, but the weight of that familiarity feels comforting in a twisted way. Studies show that your amygdala, which processes fear, activates less around predictable stress than around new situations. In other words, you'd rather suffer in a known pattern than face the anxiety of change. This is why self-sabotage can feel easier than self-renewal. Your mind equates predictability with survival. Ancient humans who strayed too far into the unknown often died, so evolution wired you to cling to what you've already experienced. But today, this instinct traps you in cycles you don't consciously choose. To break the loop, you must train your brain to tolerate uncertainty, to see the unknown not as a threat, but as a doorway. Awareness is the first step. When you feel the pull of the familiar, pause and ask, is this safe or just known? Imagine you're walking through a market and a smiling vendor hands you a free sample of something you didn't ask for. In that instant, your brain ignites with a silent command, repay. This is the reciprocity wiring code, an ancient mechanism that kept tribes alive by rewarding fairness and punishing freeloaders. Scientists have shown that when someone gives us anything, a gift, a favor, even unexpected kindness, our neural circuits flare up, activating guilt and obligation so powerful that it often overrides reason. That's why you feel pressured to buy something you don't want after accepting a freebie, or why a tiny gesture from a stranger can compel you to give back far more than you received. In one study, waiters who left a mint with the bill got significantly higher tips. When they left 2 mints, tips jumped even more. The gift didn't matter. The wiring did. Your brain perceives the smallest offering as a contract, and breaking it triggers discomfort. Reciprocity has been weaponized by marketers, cult recruiters, even hostage negotiators who know a cup of coffee can create a debt you'll scramble to repay. Think of all the times you've agreed to something you couldn't afford or didn't need just to soothe that primal guilt. That's not weakness, it's biology. The reciprocity code evolved so deeply that refusing to reciprocate feels like a threat to your standing and survival. Next time you feel that invisible hook tugging at you, remember, your impulse to repay is not always your choice. It's an ancient reflex still steering modern decisions. Imagine a hidden program running in your mind, one that predates every memory you've ever had. It doesn't care if your family nurtures you or wounds you. It only cares that you remain loyal. This is the kin loyalty algorithm, a biological directive designed to protect the survival of your bloodline at all costs. Scientists have found that mammals, including humans, have neural circuits that reward bonding with kin even when those bonds are toxic. Your brain releases oxytocin and dopamine when you reunite with family, blurring the line between love and obligation. Consider how you defend a sibling's cruelty or forgive a parent's neglect because part of you feels abandoning them would be a betrayal of your own identity. Your ancestors survived because they clung together against threats, and that ancient strategy is still encoded in your nervous system. It's why you feel guilt when you set boundaries or shame when you walk away. But awareness cracks the code. You can honor your lineage without sacrificing your well-being. You can care for your family without accepting their harm. Next time you feel the magnetic pull of loyalty to those who have hurt you, pause and ask yourself, is this devotion or programming? The kin loyalty algorithm will keep whispering that you owe them everything. But you are not bound to repeat every pattern your bloodline demands. You have the power to rewrite your role. Imagine stepping into your workplace. Before you even speak, a hidden switch flips in your brain. Your shoulders tighten, your tone softens, and you become the compliant employee. It feels automatic because it is. Psychologists call this role compliance, a reflex that locks you into a script the moment you enter a social context. When you were a child, you learned to be the good student, the obedient son or daughter. As you grew, these invisible masks multiplied. You play them without thinking: the supportive friend, the devoted partner, the polite stranger. Each role decides how much space you take up and what limits you accept. In one classic study, people were asked to wear a uniform, and simply putting it on made them more obedient to authority. Another experiment revealed that when participants were assigned the role of a subordinate, their problem-solving skills and confidence dropped dramatically. Your brain treats roles like survival strategies. They help you avoid rejection and maintain belonging. But they also trap you in patterns you didn't consciously choose. Think about the last time you felt small or hesitant in a meeting or a family gathering. That was your role compliance running the show. The mask you wear decides whether you speak up or stay silent. It decides if you trust your instincts or defer to others. When you notice it, you create a chance to pause and ask, who is choosing this role? Is it me, or is it a leftover script from childhood? Once you see the mask, you can decide whether to keep it or take it off. Imagine you have a dream so vivid it keeps you awake, a vision of success, love, or freedom. Yet when you move toward it, a smaller, colder feeling pulls you back. This is the fear-avoidance priority rule. Your brain is not designed to pursue happiness first. It is designed to avoid pain. Evolution hardwired you to survive threats, not to savor triumphs. That's why you feel fear with more urgency than desire. A lion in the grass triggers a cascade of chemicals that hijack every thought, but a potential reward triggers only a quiet spark. Neuroscientists have shown that the amygdala, your brain's alarm system, is faster and more powerful than your reward circuits. That's why fear can paralyze you before motivation even arrives. You can see this in daily life. Think about a job interview. The possibility of growth excites you, but the fear of failure feels heavier. Or, when you consider confessing love, your heart imagines rejection before connection. This isn't weakness, it's biology. Pain signals scream, while joy whispers. But knowing this unlocks choice. When you feel your goals shrinking under the weight of dread, remember, fear is overrepresented. It's an amplified echo of ancient threats that rarely apply. Next time you hesitate, pause and ask, what am I protecting myself from? And is it truly worth surrendering my future? Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the act of moving forward despite it. What if your memories are less like a timeline and more like a playlist sorted by emotion? Imagine that when you look back on your life, you're not retrieving a neat archive of facts, but replaying feelings encoded in fragments. This is called the emotional memory preference. Your brain doesn't store experiences with perfect timestamps. It tags them with mood instead. Think about it. You might not recall the exact date you first met someone important, but you can remember exactly how their presence made you feel. Maybe it was a rush of safety or a twinge of dread. That emotional tag is the hook your memory clings to. Studies show that the amygdala and hippocampus work together to strengthen memories that carry strong feelings. The brain sees emotion as a signal. This matters. Save this detail. This is why nostalgia can be so powerful. A song, a scent, or a few words can flood you with an atmosphere so vivid it feels like time travel. It's also why trauma memories often return without context, because the feeling was so intense that it burned itself into your mind. But this mechanism can distort reality. You remember how something felt more clearly than what actually happened. Events blend together if they carry similar emotions. Happiness merges birthdays and summer days into a golden haze. Sadness compresses years of loss into a single ache. To understand yourself, notice how you store your past. You're not just recalling facts. You're reactivating feelings that shaped who you became. Imagine walking into a dark room. Instantly, your mind starts labeling every shape and sound, safe or dangerous, friend or foe. This is the categorization instinct, a primal drive that sorted threats from allies long before language existed. Neuroscientists have discovered that your brain relies on fast, binary labels to conserve energy and respond to danger without delay. When you see someone frowning, you don't pause to explore every possible meaning. You tag it as negative and act accordingly. This mental shortcut is so deeply wired that it overrides nuance. It's why you label people as trustworthy or suspicious within seconds, even when you have no evidence. Research shows that in less than 200 milliseconds, your brain can assign moral or emotional categories to a stranger's face. While this saved your ancestors from predators and betrayal, it now feeds stereotypes, polarization, and prejudice. Think of the times you dismissed an idea simply because it came from the wrong group, or judged a person by one trait. Your brain craves tidy boxes because uncertainty demands too much energy. Marketers exploit this instinct by using labels like natural, luxury, or dangerous to trigger quick decisions. The irony is, these binary judgments feel accurate in the moment, even though reality is far more complex. Next time you feel the urge to classify something as good or bad without question, pause. Notice the categorization reflex tightening around your perception. The truth is, most things exist in a gray space your ancient mind can't stand. Recognizing this doesn't erase the instinct, but it frees you to question it. Imagine you walk into a room filled with people smiling at you, but one person in the corner frowns. Instantly, your brain locks onto that negative face like a heat-seeking missile. This reaction is called the threat detection override, and it's rooted deep in your survival wiring. Thousands of years ago, detecting hostility meant staying alive. The ancestors who noticed danger faster than affection were the ones who escaped being attacked or excluded. Even now, studies using eye-tracking technology reveal that your gaze snaps toward angry or disapproving expressions in milliseconds. That hyper-focus on negativity isn't just paranoia. It's an ancient biological insurance policy. For example, a single look of contempt from a stranger on the subway can echo in your thoughts all day, while dozens of friendly faces fade into the background. This bias shapes relationships and self-esteem. When you expect criticism, you start interpreting neutral expressions as threats, reinforcing a cycle of anxiety and hypervigilance. It's why one bad comment online can drown out hundreds of compliments. This negativity bias also fuels social media addiction. Your brain hunts for potential insults or rejection signals, triggering stress hormones like cortisol. Over time, this chronic vigilance can damage your sense of security and even your health. But here's the paradox. This same sensitivity once saved your ancestors from exile or attack. Recognizing that your brain is programmed to magnify threats can help you step back. The next time you feel haunted by that single negative face, remember, it's just your ancient alarm system firing, not an objective reflection of reality at all. Imagine sitting across from someone you admire. Without realizing it, you start copying the way they tilt their head, echoing their gestures, matching their tone. This is the mimicry compliance reflex, a primitive survival mechanism that still scripts your behavior today. Your ancestors relied on imitation to build trust and avoid conflict. If you mirrored the tribe's rituals and mannerisms, you were accepted. If you failed, you risked exile or attack. Modern research proves this reflex is alive in you. In one study, people who unconsciously mirrored their partner's posture were rated as more likable and persuasive. Another experiment showed that even subtle mimicry, like repeating a phrase or nodding in sync, triggers oxytocin release in the brain, creating instant connection. But mimicry isn't always harmless. When you mirror others constantly, you can lose touch with who you actually are. You start to believe the borrowed gestures and opinions are your own. Think back to a time you laughed at a joke you didn't find funny or agreed with an idea that felt wrong. That was the mimicry reflex overriding your authenticity. It happens so fast, your conscious mind barely notices. This reflex can be manipulated. Salespeople, politicians, and influencers know that if they trigger your mirroring, they can guide you toward compliance without open persuasion. The next time you feel yourself blending into someone else's rhythm, pause. Ask yourself, is this my real response or just a survival reflex echoing back? Awareness is the first step to reclaiming your own voice. Imagine you're about to open a message you've been waiting for. Your pulse quickens, your mind races ahead. This is the reward anticipation trigger. Your brain doesn't save dopamine for the moment of victory. It floods your system in the moments before you know the outcome. In evolution, this anticipation drove our ancestors to keep seeking food, mates, and shelter. The promise of reward was a more reliable motivator than satisfaction itself. Researchers have tracked dopamine spikes not when an animal receives food, but when it senses the chance of it. This same circuitry fuels addiction. The gambler is electrified not by winning, but by the spinning wheel, the heartbeat of uncertainty. The shopper feels the highest rush while hovering over the Buy Now button. Even social media exploits this loop. Every notification becomes a miniature lottery ticket, an almost that lights up your brain more than the outcome ever could. This is why habits become chains. The mind grows obsessed with the next hit of anticipation. You don't crave the object, you crave the chemical promise. But awareness can weaken this grip. When you notice yourself caught in the trance of almost, pause. Feel the restless surge for what it is, an ancient pattern repeating itself. You can step back, name it, and choose whether to obey. Because the moment you see how the anticipation trap is built, you reclaim the power to decide what deserves your devotion and what doesn't. What if the reason you constantly measure yourself against everyone else isn't vanity or insecurity, but survival instinct? Imagine living thousands of years ago in a tribe where your status determined whether you had protection, food, or even the right to stay. This is the status comparison script, a program wired into your brain because social ranking once meant life or death. From the moment you walk into a room, your mind scans for cues. Who looks confident? Who commands respect? Who seems threatened? You compare your position almost automatically. Neuroimaging studies have shown that the same regions that process physical pain also respond when you feel socially inferior. To your brain, losing status hurts as much as injury. This is why social media feels so addictive and so exhausting. You're exposed to endless signals about where you stand. The polished photos and subtle bragging aren't trivial. They trigger that ancient circuitry designed to keep you aware of your rank. But here's the paradox. The instinct that once kept you alive now traps you in cycles of self-doubt. You believe you must compete constantly, even when there's nothing at stake. To break this script, you need to question the reflex. When you feel that familiar comparison rising, ask yourself, is this measuring stick real? Is your worth truly defined by someone else's highlight reel? Imagine staring up at the night sky. You notice shapes in the stars, animals, faces, signs. This is your pattern recognition override. Your brain is a prediction machine desperate to detect meaning, even when none exists. Evolution wired this instinct because the cost of a false positive was low. A rustling bush mistaken for a predator cost you little, while missing real danger could be fatal. Researchers call this tendency pareidolia, the compulsion to see order in randomness. It's why you find faces in clouds, hear hidden messages in noise, or see conspiracies in coincidence. In one experiment, volunteers were shown static images and asked to press a button if they saw a shape. Most reported seeing patterns that never appeared. This reflex is so powerful that it hijacks logic. It fuels gambling addictions, superstition, and magical thinking. When a roulette ball lands on red 5 times, your brain insists black must be next. You create false patterns to soothe uncertainty. Marketers, cults, and scammers exploit this wiring by flooding you with coincidences and vague symbols that feel significant. The more anxious you are, the more likely you are to see phantom connections. Next time you catch yourself finding secret designs in chaos, pause. Recognize that your mind is built to prefer a comforting illusion over the terror of randomness. This doesn't make you gullible. It makes you human. Understanding this ancient impulse won't stop it, but it can help you question whether the pattern you see is truly there or just a shadow of fear. Imagine you're sitting in a meeting. The boss enters, and instantly you feel your posture change. Your voice softens, your laughter becomes measured, and even your breathing slows. You're not consciously deciding to act this way. You're obeying the dominance hierarchy subroutine, an ancient instinct that governs how animals avoid conflict and survive in groups. In primate societies, lower-ranking individuals automatically display deference to higher-status members. This same wiring lives in you. Scientists have found that when a superior appears, your brain's threat detection systems quietly activate. Subtle signals, eye contact, tone of voice, body angle, become cues to calibrate your behavior. You lean back slightly, nod more often, and choose words carefully. These micro-adjustments can feel like politeness, but they're more primal than you realize. For example, if you've ever laughed at an unfunny joke from someone powerful, that was your nervous system preventing social punishment. Studies using cortisol measurements show that subordinates under observation by high-status individuals produce more stress hormones, even if no overt threat exists. This stress doesn't just live in your head, it affects digestion, immunity, and sleep. The paradox is that these behaviors once kept your ancestors safe from aggression or exile, but today, they can distort your confidence and make you mistake respect for fear. Recognizing this instinct doesn't erase it, but it gives you room to respond consciously. The next time you feel small in the presence of authority, remember, etiquette is just the camouflage your ancient animal mind wears to stay alive. Imagine hearing only half a story. A friend says, "I saw your boss talking about you," then stops. Instantly, your mind races to fill in the gaps. Was it praise, criticism, betrayal? This is the narrative completion code, a deep cognitive reflex that makes you invent endings rather than live with uncertainty. Your brain hates ambiguity because, in ancient environments, unknowns were dangerous. An incomplete story could signal hidden threats, a predator in the dark, a rival plotting behind your back. So the mind evolved to resolve tension fast, even if the answer was wrong. Neuroscientists have shown that when we encounter an unfinished narrative, specific areas of the brain linked to anxiety and prediction light up. To calm the discomfort, your brain stitches together a conclusion, and you believe it. This reflex is why gossip spreads so easily. Someone shares a fragment of information, and your mind completes the rest, weaving assumptions into facts. It happens in relationships, too. A delayed reply becomes proof of disinterest. A glance you can't decode becomes rejection. The narrative completion code can sabotage your judgment without warning. Think about the last time you were sure you knew someone's motives, only to learn you were completely wrong. That was your mind, grasping for certainty over truth. The next time you feel the urge to finish someone else's story in your head, pause. Consider that the discomfort of not knowing is safer than believing a fiction. Awareness of this reflex is the first step toward clearer perception and real understanding. Imagine you brush your teeth every morning without thinking. You lock your door, check your phone, or tie your shoes the same way every time. This is the routine reinforcement protocol. Your brain is a prediction machine, constantly searching for ways to conserve energy. When you repeat an action enough, your neurons forge a fast lane, a shortcut that lets you operate almost unconsciously. This isn't memory in the usual sense. You don't recall each instance of brushing your teeth, you simply do it. The basal ganglia, a cluster of structures deep in your brain, stores these patterns as procedural memories. Once a behavior is encoded there, it runs automatically whenever you encounter the trigger. That's why changing habits feels so difficult. You're not arguing with logic, you're interrupting wiring. Researchers have shown that nearly 40% of your daily actions are habits, not decisions. Think about that. Almost half your life unfolds on autopilot. This was evolution's gift. By automating routines, our ancestors could reserve brain power for threats and opportunities. But this gift is double-edged. The same circuitry that helps you build healthy rituals can also trap you in destructive cycles. When you light a cigarette or check your phone, your brain rewards the familiarity, not the wisdom of the act, but awareness opens a doorway. If you can witness the automation, you can disrupt it. Each pause is a chance to rewrite the code and decide who you become. What if your first reaction when you're blamed isn't a conscious choice, but an ancient defense mechanism? Imagine your mind as a fortress designed to protect you from shame and threat. This is the blame deflection shield, a reflex so fast it hijacks honesty before you even realize it. When you're accused of doing something wrong, denial springs up almost instantly. Not always out loud, sometimes just in your own thoughts. You tell yourself you didn't mean it, it wasn't that serious, or it's someone else's fault. Psychologists call this self-serving bias, and it's rooted in survival. Long ago, admitting fault could lead to exile or punishment. The brain evolved to prioritize self-preservation over truth. Denial isn't always about lying to others. It's about reducing the pain of seeing yourself as flawed. Studies show that when you feel accused, the amygdala activates the same alarm circuits triggered by physical danger. Your nervous system reacts before your reasoning mind has a chance to process what's happening. So you deflect, minimize, or justify without thinking. But this reflex comes with a cost. It prevents growth and erodes trust. The shield that once protected you now keeps you stuck. To lower it, you need to pause when blame appears. Breathe. Notice the instinct to deny. Then ask, what if facing the truth is actually safer than hiding from it? Imagine reaching out to someone you care about and getting nothing back. No reply, no explanation, just silence. That emptiness ignites an ancient alarm in your brain. Neuroscientists have shown that social rejection activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. To your nervous system, being ignored is like touching a hot stove. This response evolved because for our ancestors, exile meant death. Belonging to a group was survival, so any hint of disconnection triggered emergency signals. In studies where volunteers were excluded from a simple ball-tossing game, their brains lit up in regions linked to real injury. That's why ghosting feels so brutal. Even without harsh words, the absence itself registers as a wound. You replay every interaction, searching for a cause, because your brain refuses to accept uncertainty. This same circuitry explains why public humiliation can feel life-threatening, or why social media likes become addictive validation. Your mind is programmed to scan for signs of acceptance or rejection every waking moment. The irony is, we rarely talk about this pain because it seems invisible, but it's as real as any bruise. Marketers and manipulators exploit this vulnerability by using scarcity and exclusion to pressure you into compliance. Next time you feel that sharp ache of being left out, remember, your brain is defending you from a threat that once could end your life. Acknowledging this doesn't erase the hurt, but it can help you see it for what it is, an ancient survival reflex still echoing in the digital age. Imagine you open your pantry and see a bag of cookies. Even if you're full, something inside you whispers that you must eat them now. This is the sugar craving trigger, an ancient survival reflex designed to keep you alive during unpredictable scarcity. For most of human history, famine was a constant threat. When early humans stumbled upon ripe fruit or honey, their brains flooded with dopamine, branding sweetness as the ultimate prize. That wiring hasn't changed. Modern abundance confuses your biology, which still expects cycles of feast and famine. Your brain treats sugar like an emergency fuel supply. Studies show that even the sight of sugary foods activates regions tied to survival urgency, not just pleasure. For example, in MRI scans, people anticipating sweets show brain patterns similar to animals about to fight for food. This explains why you can rationally know that sugar is everywhere, yet still feel powerless to resist it. The craving isn't weakness, it's an ancient alarm. But in today's world, that alarm never stops ringing. Supermarkets and advertisements bombard you with cues that trigger this reflex constantly. Over time, this leads to chronic overconsumption and guilt. The paradox is that what once protected you from starvation now becomes a trap. Your brain's attempts to save you create cycles of craving, binging, and shame. Recognizing this truth can help you step back. The next time you feel an unstoppable pull toward sugar, remember you're not just craving a taste. You're hearing the echo of ancestors who survived by treating every sweet thing as the last they might ever find. Imagine posting something online and feeling a surge of anticipation as you wait for a like, a comment, any sign that someone sees you. This isn't just vanity. It's the attention-seeking subprocess, an ancient mechanism wired into your nervous system to protect you from the ultimate threat, being forgotten. In early human tribes, invisibility meant vulnerability. If no one noticed you, you were more likely to be left behind, excluded from resources, or targeted by predators. So your brain evolved a powerful drive to be seen, acknowledged, and remembered. Studies show that when you receive social recognition, even in small doses, your brain releases dopamine, the same neurotransmitter triggered by food and survival. This chemical reward isn't about ego. It's about reassurance that you still belong. But this reflex can also hijack your peace of mind. You may find yourself checking your phone obsessively, replaying conversations, or crafting your image to earn approval you don't actually need. The subconscious mind equates visibility with safety, even when your rational self knows better. Think of the last time you felt invisible in a group or ignored by someone you cared about. That ache wasn't weakness. It was a survival alarm, warning you that disconnection once meant death. The next time you crave recognition, pause and ask, am I seeking proof of my worth or reassurance of my existence? Awareness of this sub-process allows you to choose connection without being enslaved by it. Sometimes the most powerful validation is the kind you give yourself. Imagine you watch someone cut their finger. Instantly, you feel a jolt in your own hand, as if the blade touched you. This is the injury simulation glitch. Your brain doesn't wait to see if danger is real. It runs a simulation that feels real enough to trigger flinching, sweating, even pain. Neuroscientists have discovered that the anterior cingulate cortex and insula, regions involved in pain processing, light up almost identically. Whether you experience pain or imagine it. This was once a survival advantage. In a dangerous environment, assuming the worst kept you alive. If you hesitated to flinch, you risked injury. But today, this wiring confuses imagined threat with reality. Think about how you cringe during a horror movie. You know it's fiction, but your body doesn't care. Or when you remember an old accident and your muscles tense as if it's happening again. Even empathy relies on this glitch. Mirror neurons fire when you see someone hurt, making you feel a phantom echo of their pain. But this system also creates suffering. Chronic worriers rehearse disasters in vivid detail, and their bodies respond with stress hormones as if the crisis were unfolding. The line between thought and experience blurs. Yet awareness is an antidote. When you feel the simulation hijacking your calm, pause. Remind yourself, this is a rehearsal, not reality. You can witness the phantom injury without letting it rule you. In that space, you reclaim the difference between imagination and truth. What if the reason you shapeshift around people isn't weakness, but an ancient survival script? Imagine walking into a room and feeling an invisible pull to smile more, agree faster, or hide parts of yourself before you even think about it. This is the approval chase protocol, a reflex wired into your brain long before you had words to describe it. In early human groups, acceptance wasn't optional. Belonging meant safety, food, and protection. Rejection meant isolation, which often led to death. So your nervous system evolved to treat disapproval as a real threat. The amygdala fires up, sending signals that you must adjust your behavior now. That's why you laugh at jokes you don't find funny or nod along with opinions you secretly question. Your logic center might protest later, but by then, the script has already run. Studies show that people can detect social cues of approval or disapproval in less than a second, faster than conscious reasoning can intervene. The problem is, in modern life, this reflex can leave you feeling hollow. You end up performing roles rather than living as your true self. To interrupt the approval chase protocol, start by noticing when you feel that urgent need to please. Pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, if I didn't fear losing approval, how would I act right now? Imagine sitting across from someone you love, wanting to confess a truth you've hidden for years. Your mouth opens, but something clenches shut inside you. This is the privacy preservation loop, an ancient reflex that locks certain parts of you away. Evolution designed it because vulnerability once meant exposure, an invitation for betrayal, exploitation, or exile. Neuroscientists have found that when you contemplate revealing a secret, your amygdala, the brain's fear center, surges with activity. Even in safe environments, this alarm blares, whispering that honesty could destroy you. That's why you sometimes lie by omission without meaning to, or why you deflect when someone gets too close. In studies, people reported higher stress when sharing personal details, even with trusted partners. Your brain believes that holding something back preserves power and safety. Marketers and social engineers exploit this loop by first appearing non-judgmental, then subtly weaponizing your disclosures. The paradox is that deep connection requires vulnerability, yet your ancient wiring insists that survival depends on concealment. Think of all the times you've rehearsed revealing your feelings, only to bury them again under practiced silence. That's not cowardice, it's biology. The privacy preservation loop once kept you alive when revealing too much could mean real danger. Next time you feel the urge to withhold your truth, pause. Notice the reflex gripping your throat. Remember, you're not broken or deceitful. You're human, carrying instincts shaped by a world far more perilous than the one you live in now. Imagine you're sitting in a circle of people, and suddenly, sadness wells up in your chest. But instead of showing it, you force a smile so convincing that even you start to believe it. This is the emotional containment routine, an ancient reflex that helped your ancestors survive in tight-knit groups. For early humans, belonging wasn't optional. Displaying raw emotion risked making the tribe uneasy, provoking conflict, or signaling weakness that could lead to exclusion. Your brain learned that hiding feelings was safer than expressing them. Studies in social neuroscience show that when you sense disapproval, circuits in your limbic system trigger suppression before you even form conscious thoughts. For example, researchers have recorded micro-expressions, tiny flashes of sadness or anger, that last less than a second before your face rearranges itself into socially acceptable calm. Over time, this containment becomes automatic. You laugh when you want to cry, you nod when you disagree, and you pretend you're fine because your nervous system believes that revealing vulnerability could threaten your place in the group. But this constant suppression comes at a cost. Psychologists have found that bottling up feelings leads to higher stress hormones, poor memory, and even physical illness. The paradox is that what once kept you safe now corrodes your sense of authenticity. Recognizing this instinct doesn't mean you have to spill everything, but it allows you to question whether your smile is genuine or just camouflage. The next time you feel that automatic mask slide over your real emotions, remember it's an ancient survival routine, not always the truth of who you are. Imagine you're alone in a room, yet you feel a camera lens watching you. Without thinking, your posture straightens, your movements become precise, and your mind starts filtering every action. This is the surveillance awareness signal, a subconscious alert that flips on the moment you sense you're being observed. Long before security cameras existed, your ancestors lived in small tribes where constant scrutiny determined survival. If you broke a norm or betrayed trust, the consequences could be exile or death. Your brain adapted by evolving hypervigilance whenever eyes were near. Modern research shows that even an image of eyes on a poster increases honesty and compliance. In one experiment, people donated more to a communal fund simply because a pair of printed eyes stared back. Another study found that shoppers littered less under a fake camera. Your nervous system can't distinguish between real and symbolic observation. It reacts the same way. Think about the last time you behaved differently just because someone else entered the room. That wasn't politeness. It was your ancient survival code activating. The surveillance awareness signal makes you conform, but it also traps you in self-monitoring that can erode authenticity. You edit your words, restrain impulses, and live as if every moment is an audition. The next time you feel yourself performing under invisible eyes, pause and ask, "Who am I trying to please?" Awareness of this signal is the first step to reclaiming your freedom. Being seen doesn't have to mean losing yourself. Imagine someone tells you, "I care about you," but their voice is cold, flat, stripped of melody. You feel uneasy, even suspicious. This is the cold voice bias. Your brain is wired to read emotional cues in tone before it even processes words. Evolution taught humans that warmth in pitch signaled safety, cooperation, and trust, while monotone voices hinted at threat or indifference. Studies in neuroscience show that your auditory cortex works with your limbic system to decode vocal signals instantly. Even newborns react to soothing, sing-song voices by calming their heartbeat. As adults, we still crave that warmth. In experiments, participants rated identical sentences as more trustworthy when spoken with gentle intonation. The words didn't matter nearly as much as the pitch. This is why customer service scripts are drenched in cheerful tones. Your brain wants reassurance, not just information. But this bias can also mislead you. A warm voice can mask deception, while a flat tone can belong to someone honest but anxious. Your nervous system doesn't always distinguish intent from delivery. Think of a doctor delivering critical news in a detached voice, or a friend who sounds clipped when they're simply tired. The cold voice bias makes you interpret neutrality as rejection. Awareness of this reflex can soften its impact. Next time you sense distrust rising, pause. Ask yourself, is it the content or the tone triggering me? When you separate the signal from the story, you open space for clarity and connection. What if the places you've stood are more responsible for who you are than the years you've lived? Imagine your mind as a vast map dotted with emotional bookmarks, each location holding memories your conscious mind has long forgotten. This is the place memory code. You don't store experiences purely by time. You anchor them to where they happened. Think about it. You can walk into an old classroom and feel a rush of emotions before you remember a single fact. The smell of the floor, the angle of the light. These details bypass logic and go straight to your limbic system. Neuroscientists call this context-dependent memory. The hippocampus links events to spatial coordinates, binding feeling to place. That's why a childhood home can feel haunted even when it's empty. Or why returning to a city you visited once can bring back an entire season of your life in a single wave. The facts may be blurry, but the emotional tone remains sharp. This is also why certain places can trigger sadness or joy you can't explain. You're not imagining it. You're stepping onto neural pathways laid down years ago. To understand yourself more fully, pay attention to where your memories live. Places are the hidden filing cabinets of your past. Sometimes, all it takes to unlock a feeling is crossing an old threshold. Imagine pacing your room at night, heart racing over thoughts you can't silence. Without realizing, you start rocking back and forth or walking in circles. This is the motion-soothing circuit, an ancient system that calms your nervous system through movement. Neuroscientists have found that rhythmic motion signals the brain that you've escaped danger, even when no threat is present. In early human history, survival often depended on fleeing predators or hostile groups. Movement meant action. Action meant survival. Today, your body still believes that motion equals safety. Research shows that rocking activates the vestibular system in your inner ear, which in turn reduces stress hormones like cortisol. That's why babies instinctively stop crying when rocked, or why people under extreme pressure pace without thinking. It's not just habit. It's a primal neurological loop. Even animals self-soothe this way. Elephants sway when anxious, and dogs circle before lying down to settle their nerves. In one study, patients with insomnia fell asleep faster when rocked gently, as their brains interpreted the movement as a sign all was well. Marketers have even designed chairs and gadgets that mimic these motions to tap into your instinctive need for movement reassurance. Next time you find yourself pacing or rocking, don't dismiss it as mindless fidgeting. It's an ancient reflex, a coded message to your brain that you are not trapped. You are in motion, and in motion, your mind believes it has already survived whatever danger it fears. Imagine you're lying awake at 2 a.m., replaying the same mistake over and over. You tell yourself you're trying to solve it, but really, your mind is stuck in a loop. This is the rumination priority bias, an ancient brain reflex that mistakes overthinking for preparation. Thousands of years ago, relentless focus on a threat could mean survival. If you replayed the memory of where the predator struck, you might avoid it next time. But in modern life, this instinct turns on itself. Studies show that when you ruminate, your brain activates the default mode network, a system wired for self-referential thought. Instead of finding solutions, you rehearse the pain, carving it deeper into memory. For example, researchers have found that people who ruminate after social rejection experience prolonged cortisol spikes, as if the threat were happening again. Your brain believes that by revisiting the problem, you're gaining control, but often, you're only reinforcing helplessness. This bias fuels anxiety and depression because it traps you in the past while convincing you it's productive. The paradox is that what once kept your ancestors vigilant against real danger now chains you to imaginary threats. It's why you can spend hours dissecting a single comment or replaying a decision without feeling any closer to clarity. Recognizing this reflex doesn't mean you'll instantly stop, but it gives you the chance to notice when thought becomes rumination. The next time you catch yourself spiraling, remember that your brain is just trying to protect you the only way it knows how, even if it only makes you hurt more. Imagine someone you love making a mistake that would infuriate you coming from a stranger. But instead of anger, you feel a flicker of understanding, an almost automatic forgiveness. This is the familiar person override, a hidden bias that rewires your judgment the moment you recognize someone's face. Your brain evolved to prioritize familiarity because it once meant safety. In early tribes, trusting those you knew increased your odds of survival, while skepticism toward outsiders protected you from betrayal. Modern neuroscience shows that when you see a familiar person, your amygdala, the brain's fear center, reduces its activity. Simultaneously, regions linked to empathy and bonding light up. This makes you more tolerant, more willing to excuse, and less critical. It's why you can watch a friend cross a boundary and still rationalize their actions, or why family members can repeat patterns you'd never accept from anyone else. In one study, participants assigned to work with a familiar partner rated mistakes as less severe compared to when the same mistakes came from an unfamiliar partner. Familiarity acts like a filter, blurring the sharp edges of wrongdoing. But this reflex isn't always harmless. It can blind you to patterns of disrespect or manipulation simply because your nervous system feels safer with the known. The next time you find yourself making excuses for someone simply because they're familiar, pause and ask, would I tolerate this from a stranger? Awareness of the familiar person. Override is the first step toward choosing conscious loyalty over automatic forgiveness. Imagine standing outside on a calm day when, without warning, a cold gust of wind sweeps across your skin. Your heart rate quickens. Your senses sharpen. For a moment, you feel the urge to scan your surroundings. This isn't superstition. It's the wind anxiety signal, an ancient reflex buried deep in your nervous system. Long before humans built cities, shifting wind meant survival information. A sudden breeze could carry the scent of a predator, hint at approaching danger, or signal a storm. Your brain evolved to treat moving air as an early warning system, priming you for action before conscious thought. Neuroscientists have shown that unexpected changes in airflow activate the amygdala, the part of your brain responsible for threat detection. Even today, when you know intellectually there's no immediate danger, your body reacts as if something unseen is coming. Think about the last time wind rattled your windows late at night. Did you feel that pulse of unease? That was your survival wiring, honed over thousands of years. The wind anxiety signal can also amplify emotional states you're already carrying. A sudden draft during an argument or an unexpected breeze in a lonely place can magnify feelings of fear, tension, or isolation. The next time you feel your chest tighten when the wind shifts, pause and notice the reflex without judgment. It's not irrational. It's a living memory of ancestors who survived by trusting the invisible. Awareness transforms the signal from a trigger into an invitation to breathe and stay present. What if the reason you rush to fill silence isn't awkwardness, but an ancient alarm system? Imagine your ancestors sitting around a fire, every ear tuned for the smallest shift in the dark. In those days, silence often meant something was hiding, watching. This is the silence intolerance code. Your brain evolved to associate quiet with threat. When the usual sounds of life stopped, it was a signal to prepare for danger. That wiring still lives in you, even though the predators are gone. So when a conversation pauses, or a room grows still, your nervous system interprets it as unease. That's why you feel compelled to say something, anything, just to break the tension. You joke, fidget, or fill the space with distractions. Studies show that people will endure unpleasant noise rather than sit in prolonged silence. Your amygdala prefers predictable sound over the unknown void. But here's the paradox. Silence is also where clarity happens. It's where you hear your real thoughts. The very stillness you avoid is the doorway to self-awareness. Next time you feel the urge to fill the quiet, pause instead. Notice the discomfort. Breathe. Ask yourself, what am I afraid to hear when the noise fades away? Imagine walking into a crowded room. Without thinking, your eyes scan for the nearest window or source of daylight. You feel calmer near it, safer somehow. This is the window-seeking instinct, an ancient drive wired into your nervous system long before modern buildings existed. Early humans survived by constantly scanning horizons for predators or rival tribes. A clear vantage point often meant the difference between life and death. Neuroscientists have discovered that your brain still rewards proximity to natural light and unobstructed views with dopamine, the chemical of safety and reward. Studies show hospital patients recover faster in rooms with windows, and office workers report higher satisfaction and focus when seated near daylight. Even animals mirror this instinct. Birds and mammals gravitate toward edges and openings where they can monitor threats. In modern life, this reflex shows up as restlessness in windowless spaces or the impulse to claim the seat by the window in a cafe. Marketers and architects exploit this wiring by designing spaces flooded with natural light, knowing you'll instinctively feel more trust and comfort there. The irony is, most of us rarely face predators anymore, yet our brains still act as if we might. Next time you feel compelled to move closer to a window, pause and notice the instinct quietly guiding you. It isn't vanity or preference. It's an ancient survival mechanism reminding you to keep watch over the world beyond the glass, just in case something is still out there in the unseen. Imagine you try to remember last summer, and your mind sorts the memories into neat blocks: the trip in June, the lazy July mornings, the August evenings that felt like an ending. This is the time block bias, your brain's instinct to organize experience into rhythmic segments. Linear time is a cultural invention, but the human mind prefers patterns and cycles. For early humans, dividing time into chunks, dawn, dusk, seasons, helped predict danger and opportunity. That ancient habit still drives how you recall life. Studies show that when you retrieve memories, your hippocampus doesn't pull them from a smooth timeline. Instead, it tags them to landmarks and rhythms. For example, researchers have found that people are far more likely to remember events anchored to beginnings or endings, a phenomenon called the temporal landmark effect. That's why New Year's feels like a fresh start, or why Monday has a different weight than Sunday, even though the hours themselves are identical. This bias can be helpful, giving your life structure and a sense of progress. But it also distorts reality. You might feel that a rough morning ruins an entire day, or that a bad week defines your whole month. The brain wants tidy packages, even if the story isn't accurate. Recognizing this instinct doesn't erase it, but it lets you question the narrative. The next time you feel trapped in a time block, a doomed morning, a wasted year, remember that time isn't really divided. It's just your mind sorting chaos into rhythms that feel safe enough to understand. Imagine standing outside on a calm day when, without warning, a cold gust of wind sweeps across your skin. Your heart rate quickens. Your senses sharpen. For a moment, you feel the urge to scan your surroundings. This isn't superstition. It's the wind anxiety signal, an ancient reflex buried deep in your nervous system. Long before humans built cities, shifting wind meant survival information. A sudden breeze could carry the scent of a predator, hint at approaching danger, or signal a storm. Your brain evolved to treat moving air as an early warning system, priming you for action before conscious thought. Neuroscientists have shown that unexpected changes in airflow activate the amygdala, the part of your brain responsible for threat detection. Even today, when you know intellectually there's no immediate danger, your body reacts as if something unseen is coming. Think about the last time wind rattled your windows late at night. Did you feel that pulse of unease? That was your survival wiring, honed over thousands of years. The wind anxiety signal can also amplify emotional states you're already carrying. A sudden draft during an argument or an unexpected breeze in a lonely place can magnify feelings of fear, tension, or isolation. The next time you feel your chest tighten when the wind shifts, pause and notice the reflex without judgment. It's not irrational. It's a living memory of ancestors who survived by trusting the invisible. Awareness transforms the signal from a trigger into an invitation to breathe and stay present. Imagine you set a goal to walk exactly 10,000 steps a day. You watch the counter climb, feeling a rush of satisfaction as you near the target. This is the step count comfort loop. Your brain is wired to find comfort in round numbers. They feel complete, achievable, and somehow more meaningful, even though they're often arbitrary. Researchers have found that when people track their behavior, like distance run, calories burned, or hours worked, they gravitate toward milestones ending in zeros or fives. These numbers create the illusion of closure, a sense that you've finished something important. But this perception is a mental shortcut, not an objective truth. The 10,000-step goal wasn't born from deep science. It originated in a Japanese marketing campaign in the 1960s, selling a pedometer named Manpo-K, which means 10,000 steps meter. Yet it became a cultural benchmark, a symbol of health and discipline. Your brain treats crossing these thresholds as a reward, releasing dopamine that reinforces the habit. This is why stopping at 9,150 steps feels incomplete, even if it makes no real difference to your health. The same dynamic appears in other domains: writing 500 words, reading 50 pages, saving $1,000. Rounded targets offer an easy narrative. You've succeeded. But they also create pressure and guilt when you fall short by a fraction. Awareness of this loop helps you reclaim perspective. Next time you chase a perfect number, pause and ask yourself, is this target meaningful or just a symbol? In that question, you find freedom beyond the counter. What if the person you trust most isn't the one who knows the truth, but the one whose voice sounds like it does? Imagine you're in a room full of opinions, and one deep, steady voice cuts through the noise. Instantly, your brain gives it more weight, even before you hear the content. This is the authority voice bias. Studies show that lower-pitched voices are consistently rated as more competent, trustworthy, and persuasive. It's not logic deciding, it's ancient instinct. In early human groups, deeper voices signaled strength and maturity. Following them increased your odds of survival. But in modern life, this reflex can backfire. A confident tone doesn't guarantee wisdom. Politicians, Salespeople and leaders often train their voices to exploit this bias, knowing you'll confuse tone with truth. That's why you might doubt a high, uncertain voice, even if the information is accurate. Your brain shortcuts careful analysis in favor of vocal authority. To protect yourself, learn to separate the message from the sound. When you feel that pull toward a deep, commanding voice, pause. Ask, if this same idea were spoken in a different tone, would I believe it just as strongly? Your instincts aren't flawed, they're just outdated. Awareness is how you reclaim your judgment. Imagine sitting in a quiet room when your phone pings. Instantly, your attention snaps toward it. You didn't decide to check. It happened before thought. This is the notification obedience script, a modern hijacking of ancient neural wiring. Your brain evolved to treat sudden signals, cracks of twigs, urgent calls, as critical survival cues. Ignoring them once meant risking attack or missing vital news. Today, app designers exploit this reflex. Each ping is engineered to trigger a surge of dopamine and cortisol, combining reward with stress. That's why you feel both excited and uneasy when you hear it. Studies show that even silenced devices can degrade focus, as your brain remains alert for the possibility of a signal. In one experiment, participants who received unpredictable notifications performed worse on cognitive tasks and reported higher anxiety. You think you're choosing to check, but you're often obeying a script written deep in your nervous system. The compulsion to respond feels like autonomy slipping away, replaced by reflex. Marketers understand that urgency overrides your conscious goals. Limited time offers, flashing alerts, and red dots are all designed to create a sense of emergency. The irony is, most notifications aren't important, but your mind can't distinguish real threat from artificial urgency. Next time your phone calls to you, pause. Notice the tension in your body, the impulse to obey. That pull is not curiosity or care. It's an ancient survival mechanism repurposed to keep you locked in a cycle of distraction you never truly consented to. Imagine someone does you a favor, lends you money, offers support, or helps you move. At first, you feel gratitude, warm and genuine. But soon, something heavier creeps in. Guilt for needing more, shame for wanting anything else. This is the gratitude-guilt coupling, an ancient reflex that transforms appreciation into submission. In early human groups, survival depended on reciprocity. If someone helped you, you were expected to repay them or risk being seen as a burden. Your brain evolved circuits that bind thankfulness to compliance. Studies show that when you receive aid, your anterior cingulate cortex lights up with both reward and anxiety. This tension is designed to keep relationships balanced, but in modern life, it often becomes a trap. For example, researchers have found that people who feel chronic indebtedness after support are less likely to ask for help again, even when they truly need it. The instinct whispers that if you take too much, you'll be expelled from the tribe. This is why you might downplay your struggles or pretend you're fine to avoid feeling like you owe more than you can give. The paradox is that gratitude should strengthen bonds, but unchecked, it can erode self-worth and silence your needs. Recognizing this ancient coupling doesn't mean you'll stop feeling guilty, but it helps you see the pattern clearly. The next time you feel the weight of guilt after someone's kindness, remember, it's your nervous system trying to keep you safe in a world that no longer demands such rigid balance. Imagine walking into a room and sensing that something is wrong before you see or hear a clue. A sour note in the air, a whiff of decay, or an unfamiliar chemical scent makes your skin tighten. This is your smell threat detector, the oldest safety circuit in your brain. Long before humans learned to speak or write, survival depended on detecting invisible dangers through scent. Your olfactory system is directly connected to the amygdala and hippocampus, regions responsible for fear and memory. That's why smells can trigger instant, visceral reactions faster than conscious thought. Studies have shown that even subtle changes in body odor can alert you to aggression or illness in others. When someone is afraid, Their sweat carries stress-related compounds that your brain registers as a cue to prepare for threat. The scent of rot once meant spoiled food, infection, or death nearby. The acrid bite of smoke signaled fire long before alarms existed. These primitive associations still guide your instincts today. Think about the last time you caught a strange odor and felt unease without understanding why. Your rational mind may have dismissed it, but your nervous system was already activating. The smell threat detector is not superstition. It's an evolutionary inheritance. It can save you, but it can also generate anxiety in environments filled with artificial smells. The next time you feel that gut-level alarm, pause and honor it. Your brain is reading chemical signatures the way your ancestors read the wind. Awareness of this detector helps you trust your instincts without being ruled by them. Imagine you hear a sudden noise behind you, a sharp crack in the dark. Before you can think, you stop breathing. Your muscles lock. This is the freeze response priority. While most people know about fight or flight, freezing is even older, buried deeper in your nervous system. In the wild, stillness was often the best chance to survive. Movement could draw a predator's eye, while freezing made you invisible. Neuroscientists have discovered that the amygdala signals your body to halt before you consciously register the threat. This freeze response happens in a fraction of a second, faster than any deliberate reaction. Your heart rate may drop, your eyes widen, your awareness sharpens into a tense spotlight. The ancient circuitry that governs this is the periaqueductal gray, a region near the brainstem that overrides your plans. Even today, you feel it in mundane moments, when you're startled by an unexpected email or caught off guard in a conversation. You freeze because your biology assumes danger. Ironically, this reflex often makes you feel ashamed or weak, as if you failed to act. But freezing isn't failure. It's the oldest form of wisdom. Wait, assess, survive. When you understand this response, you can forgive yourself for the moments you went still. The body wasn't betraying you. It was protecting you with a reflex older than language. Next time you feel yourself go rigid, pause, and remember, freezing is the first line of defense, not the last. What if the reason you reach out to fix someone's hair or brush lint off their clothes isn't just habit, but an ancient bonding ritual? Imagine early humans sitting close around a fire, touching each other's skin to pick out debris or smooth, tangled hair. This simple act wasn't about appearance. It was a grooming bond signal, a silent code that said, "You belong with me." Even today, small gestures like adjusting a collar or holding a hand send powerful messages of trust and safety. Neurobiologists have found that grooming touch releases oxytocin, the hormone that deepens connection and lowers stress. Your brain doesn't see it as vanity. It reads it as proof you're part of a group. Think about the last time someone gently tucked your hair behind your ear or squeezed your shoulder. You probably felt a flicker of warmth and acceptance that words couldn't match. That feeling is millions of years old. But here's what's fascinating. Even self-grooming, like running your hand through your hair or rubbing your neck, can signal vulnerability or a need for reassurance. It's your body's way of broadcasting that you're open to connection. So the next time you notice these gestures, pay attention. You're watching a language older than speech, a code your nervous system still understands. Imagine recalling a childhood moment so vivid it feels like a photograph. You're certain every detail is true, the light, the voices, the way it felt. But your brain isn't a recording device, it's a storyteller. This is the memory accuracy trade-off, a survival adaptation that favors meaning over precision. Neuroscientists have discovered that each time you remember something, you're not retrieving a file, you're reconstructing it. You blend fragments of fact with emotion, belief, and suggestion. The more intense the feeling, the more convinced you are it's real. In experiments, participants shown doctored photos confidently remembered events that never happened, complete with sensory details. Your brain does this because accuracy is less important than coherence. A memory that feels emotionally true helps you make sense of the world and guides future choices. That's why arguments about what really happened can feel impossible to resolve. Both sides are convinced their version is reality. Even eyewitness testimony, once considered reliable, has been shown to be alarmingly susceptible to distortion. The irony is, the more vividly you recall something, the less likely it is to be accurate. Next time you feel certain about a memory, pause. Notice the confidence surging through you. That conviction is not proof. It's a byproduct of the brain's need to craft a story that feels complete. You're not defective for misremembering. You're human, carrying an ancient system designed to prioritize meaning over perfect truth. Imagine you meet someone new. They tell you their name, and within seconds, it slips away like vapor. You replay the moment, embarrassed, wondering why such a simple detail vanished. This is the name recall loop, a quirk of your brain shaped by thousands of years when names simply didn't matter much. In ancient tribes, survival relied on recognizing faces, reading expressions, and decoding status through tone and body language. Names were often unnecessary, since everyone knew everyone by sight and role. Today, your brain still prioritizes biologically relevant data over abstract labels. Neuroscientists have found that the fusiform face area, responsible for facial recognition, lights up intensely when you see a person. But remembering their name activates smaller, less specialized networks. For example, studies show that even when people pay close attention, names are recalled far less accurately than occupations or personality traits. This isn't a failure of intelligence. It's an echo of a time when identifying allies and threats was more crucial than memorizing what they were called. That's why you might remember a stranger's mood, clothing, or gestures perfectly, but still blank on their name minutes later. The paradox is that our modern social rituals place huge importance on name recall, even though your ancient brain doesn't care. Recognizing this instinct doesn't mean you'll never forget again, but it helps you forgive the lapse. The next time you feel foolish for asking someone to repeat their name, remember, your mind is built to track connection and safety, not arbitrary sounds. Imagine feeling a restless pressure in your chest after a small mistake, like taking the last cookie or telling a harmless lie. You know it's minor, but part of you can't relax until you confess. This is the confession urge trigger, a neurological reflex that makes disclosure feel like relief. Long before modern morality, your ancestors survived in tight-knit tribes where hidden faults threatened group trust. Your brain evolved to equate transparency with safety and secrecy with danger. When you confess, you don't just clear your conscience, you discharge tension stored in the nervous system. Studies using brain scans have shown that confession activates the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, an area linked to emotional regulation and reward. Even when no penalty follows, simply admitting what you did can produce measurable drops in stress hormones. This explains why you sometimes feel compelled to share trivial misdeeds, or why you blurt out secrets that would be smarter to keep. The impulse isn't always moral. It's your neural circuitry craving the clean slate sensation. Think about the last time you confessed something small just to ease the pressure inside you. That wasn't weakness. It was your ancient survival code trying to restore equilibrium. But this reflex can also be manipulated. Skilled interrogators know that prompting tiny admissions can open the door to bigger disclosures. The next time you feel the urge to unload a secret, pause and ask, "Is this truly necessary, or just my brain seeking relief?" Awareness of this trigger allows you to choose confession with intention instead of compulsion. Imagine you try to remember everyone you've ever met, the neighbors, classmates, coworkers, distant relatives. Quickly, the faces blur, the names slip away. This is the group size regulation. Your brain evolved to track roughly 150 meaningful relationships, a limit known as Dunbar's number. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar found that primate brain size predicted group size, and humans were no exception. In our earliest communities, maintaining bonds with about 150 people balanced cooperation and trust. Beyond this threshold, Empathy begins to thin out. You can recognize more faces in passing, but the emotional depth fades. That's why in large organizations or online networks, you start seeing others as abstractions. Their stories flatten into roles: stranger, colleague, follower. Your nervous system simply can't sustain rich connections with thousands. Neuroimaging studies show that regions like the neocortex strain to hold details about everyone. This isn't a flaw, it's a trade-off. By focusing on a smaller circle, your ancestors could build alliances strong enough to survive. But modern life constantly pushes you past this limit. Social media floods you with names and faces you can't quite place, creating the illusion of intimacy without real attachment. Awareness of this capacity helps you be more compassionate with yourself. You're not cold for feeling distant, you're human. When relationships feel shallow, remember, your brain wasn't built for endless connection. It was built for a tribe you could hold in your heart at once. What if the reason you can't resist immediate pleasure isn't a lack of willpower, but an ancient survival instinct? Imagine your ancestors living in an unpredictable world where food and safety were never guaranteed. For them, taking a reward now was always smarter than risking it disappearing later. This is the reward delay aversion. Your brain is wired to prioritize instant gratification. When you get something pleasurable right away, a sweet taste, a social approval, a quick win, dopamine floods your system. That surge reinforces the behavior, making you want to repeat it. But waiting for a bigger, delayed reward feels like a gamble. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that plans for the future, has to fight against deeper, older circuits screaming for satisfaction now. That's why saving money, sticking to long-term goals, or resisting temptations can feel like an internal war. Studies have shown that even when you logically know waiting will bring more benefit, your emotional brain treats the delay as potential loss. Immediate rewards feel certain. Future rewards feel abstract and risky. To outsmart this reflex, break big goals into smaller, near-term wins. Give your brain milestones it can see and celebrate. You don't have to erase the instinct, just learn to work with it instead of against it. Imagine someone placing a warm hand on your shoulder during a moment of fear. Instantly, your body softens, your guard lowers, and you feel a sense of trust you can't explain. This is the soft touch override, an ancient reflex that bypasses logic and anchors connection through the skin. Neuroscientists have shown that gentle touch stimulates the release of oxytocin, a neurochemical that creates feelings of safety and bonding. Even the lightest contact can calm the amygdala, the brain's alarm center, silencing fear signals before your conscious mind can object. In one study, patients who held a nurse's hand during procedures reported significantly less pain and anxiety, despite no change in medication. Marketers and negotiators know this too. A reassuring pat on the arm can make you more likely to comply, to trust, to believe. This is why kindness delivered through touch feels more convincing than any promise spoken aloud. Your brain evolved to interpret skin contact as proof of alliance, something no contract or oath could replicate. The irony is, this reflex operates even when you're aware it's being used. You might recognize the tactic, but the warmth still penetrates your defenses. Next time you feel a surge of trust after a simple touch, pause. Notice the ancient circuitry at work, the reflex that tells you you're safe. This doesn't mean you should mistrust every hand that reaches for yours, but remember, your sense of security is shaped by a biological script millions of years old, still running quietly beneath reason. Imagine you're deciding whether to fly or drive. Statistically, flying is safer by orders of magnitude, but your mind replays that one vivid news story about a plane crash. Suddenly, the numbers feel meaningless. This is the probability blind spot glitch, your brain's tendency to judge risk based on memory, not math. In ancient times, this made sense. If you saw someone attacked by a predator, that single experience carried more survival weight than any abstract pattern. Evolution shaped you to react to dramatic, emotional events as if they were common. Neuroscientists have found that the amygdala, the brain's fear center, tags intense memories with special urgency. Even decades later, those memories outvote logic. For example, studies show that after high-profile disasters, people avoid similar activities for months, despite no change in actual danger. This bias isn't just about fear. It fuels everything from gambling habits to financial decisions. One lucky win can convince you you're due for more, even as probabilities say otherwise. The paradox is that while this glitch once kept you alive, it now distorts your ability to make rational choices. You become convinced that what you remember most vividly is what is most likely to happen. Recognizing this instinct doesn't erase it, but it lets you pause and question whether your reaction is based on reality or a single loud memory. The next time a story hijacks your sense of probability, remember, your brain evolved to prioritize impact over accuracy, a design that no longer fits the modern world. Imagine hearing a list of dry statistics about a danger you might face. Now imagine hearing a story, vivid, emotional, filled with characters and consequences. Which one stays with you longer? This is the storytelling bias engine, an ancient neural mechanism that makes you remember information more effectively when it's wrapped in narrative. Long before humans developed writing, knowledge was passed through spoken tales. A warning about poisonous berries or hidden predators carried more impact if it had a hero, a crisis, and an outcome. Your brain evolved to prioritize this structure because survival depended on remembering it. Neuroscientists have discovered that stories activate not just language centers, but also regions tied to emotion and sensory experience. When you hear a narrative, your brain simulates it as if you are living it yourself. This simulation cements memory and makes details easier to recall. That's why advertising relies on storytelling to make you care about products you'd otherwise ignore, and why political speeches use personal anecdotes to sway opinion. But the storytelling bias engine also has a hidden cost. It can make you trust vivid stories over dry facts, even when the facts are more accurate. Think of the last time you believed something just because the story felt true. That wasn't rational. It was your neural survival code guiding perception. The next time you feel drawn to a narrative, pause and ask, is this tale helping me understand reality or just making it more comfortable? Awareness of this bias is the first step toward clarity. Imagine you look at a face with perfect symmetry, the eyes aligned, the cheekbones mirrored, the mouth balanced. You feel an almost magnetic pull. This is the symmetry attraction bias. Your brain is wired to trust and desire symmetry, not because it's fashionable, but because it once signaled survival. In our evolutionary past, balanced features suggested genetic health and fertility. A symmetrical face meant fewer developmental disturbances, stronger immune function, and a higher chance of healthy offspring. Over thousands of generations, these preferences became instinctive. Researchers using eye tracking technology have shown that people spend more time looking at symmetrical faces and rate them as more attractive and trustworthy, even when they can't explain why. The same bias extends to design. You feel calmer in spaces where lines mirror each other, where shapes repeat with precision. Your nervous system reads order as safety, but this reflex also narrows perception. It makes you overlook the beauty in asymmetry, the character etched by time and experience. It can cause you to dismiss people whose faces don't fit the ancient template, even when their minds and hearts surpass any ideal. Awareness softens this bias. Next time you catch yourself drawn to a perfect pattern, pause and ask, am I seeing truth or just biology? In that moment, you reclaim your choice to look deeper. Because real connection isn't measured by symmetry, it's measured by presence and understanding. What if the reason you care which chair you sit in or what font your document uses isn't about preference but survival instinct? Imagine your brain as a prediction engine, constantly scanning for ways to feel in charge. This is the control-seeking reflex, a hidden drive that craves even the tiniest decisions to create a sense of safety. When life feels uncertain, small choices become anchors. Picking a seat near the exit, arranging your desk just so, or tweaking your phone settings gives your nervous system the illusion of control. And illusion is often enough to calm anxiety. Neuroscientists have found that choice activates reward circuits in the brain. Even when the stakes are trivial, the mere act of deciding releases dopamine, making you feel more secure. Your mind interprets small control as evidence that you can handle bigger threats. Think about the last time you felt overwhelmed. Did you clean your space or reorganize something minor? That was your brain's way of reclaiming predictability. But here's the paradox. Chasing control too rigidly can create more stress when life refuses to fit your plans. The next time you feel the urge to micromanage details, pause. Ask yourself, is this about the choice itself or about needing to feel safe in an unpredictable world? Imagine climbing a staircase and feeling compelled to count every step. You don't decide to do it, it happens on autopilot. This is the counting habit loop, a reflex that calms your survival mind by creating artificial order in chaos. Neuroscientists have discovered that the brain craves rhythm and repetition, especially under stress. Counting engages the basal ganglia, regions linked to habit and routine, which in turn suppresses activity in the amygdala, your fear center. That's why tallying breaths or bites can feel oddly soothing, even when life feels out of control. For early humans, repetitive actions were a way to focus attention and avoid danger. Counting helped track time, resources, and threats. Today, this ancient system surfaces in rituals you barely notice. You count ceiling tiles while waiting for bad news or tap out patterns when anxious. In studies, participants who performed repetitive counting during stress reported lower heart rates and greater feelings of control. The irony is, you often think you're wasting time or being irrational, but your brain is practicing self-preservation. Marketers exploit this instinct with progress bars, countdowns, and numbered lists that hook your attention through structured anticipation. Next time you find yourself counting for no clear reason, pause. Feel the rhythm anchoring you to the present moment. This isn't trivial. It's an ancient circuit trying to protect you from the unpredictability your mind still perceives as dangerous. You're not obsessed or broken. You're human, wired to find safety in even the smallest fragments of predictable order. Imagine you're planning a simple trip, but instead of picking the fastest route, you map out 3 alternatives, check the weather, and pack extra supplies you probably won't need. This is the redundancy preference code, your brain's deep instinct to multiply options even when logic says one is enough. For early humans, a single failed hunt or a blocked path could mean starvation or death. Having backups wasn't a luxury. It was survival. Today, that same wiring drives you to over-prepare, to build safety nets against even minor risks. Neuroscientists have found that uncertainty triggers activity in the anterior cingulate cortex, the part of your brain that tracks potential errors and demands more contingency plans. This is why you feel uneasy when you have only one option, no matter how reliable it is. For example, studies show that people will pay more or exert extra effort to create backup plans they never actually use. The mere existence of a plan B soothes the ancient fear of being trapped. But the paradox is that this instinct often wastes energy and creates stress. You second-guess decisions, rehearse endless scenarios, and feel as if every choice carries life or death stakes. Recognizing this reflex doesn't mean you'll stop wanting redundancy, but it helps you see that sometimes a single clear path really is enough. The next time you feel compelled to layer backup plans over something simple, remember, your mind is replaying an old survival script that once saved lives, but now just steals peace. Imagine spotting a tangled cord in the corner of your desk. No matter how busy you are, part of your mind keeps circling back to it. You feel an almost magnetic pull to fix it. This is the not focus reflex, a hidden survival mechanism that makes disorder impossible to ignore. Long before modern life, your ancestors depended on woven nets, ropes, and bindings to hunt, build shelter, and secure food. A single tangle or broken weave could mean danger, escape of prey, or collapse of safety. Your brain evolved to see knots and messes as problems demanding immediate resolution. Neuroscientists have found that visual clutter increases cognitive load and stress hormones, even when you try to ignore it. Your amygdala, the brain's threat detector, scans for disorder as a proxy for potential risk. That's why tight knots or chaotic piles create an itch you can't easily scratch. When you untangle them, your brain rewards you with a burst of relief, dopamine signaling that safety has been restored. This reflex can be useful, helping you stay organized and attentive. But it also has a hidden cost. You can become so consumed by small fixes that you lose sight of larger priorities. Think about the last time you wasted hours reorganizing something trivial just to feel settled. That wasn't procrastination alone. It was your survival wiring in overdrive. The next time you feel compelled to tidy or untangle, pause and ask, is this truly urgent or just my mind chasing the illusion of control? Awareness of the not-focus reflex lets you choose where to place your energy. Imagine you're scrolling through the news and see a story about someone your age who died unexpectedly. For a split second, you feel a jolt, a glimpse of your own mortality. But almost immediately, your mind drags your attention somewhere else. This is the mortality suppression protocol. Your brain treats awareness of death as a system error, something to quarantine before it disrupts function. Evolution favored minds that could focus on survival without freezing under the weight of existential dread. Neuroscientists have shown that when people are reminded of death, the amygdala and other threat processing areas activate, but soon afterward, the brain dampens the response to protect daily functioning. This is why you can intellectually know that life is finite while emotionally feeling almost immortal. The mind walls off mortality to preserve sanity. Psychologists call this terror management, the idea that most cultures, religions, and personal goals exist partly to buffer you from death awareness. Even mundane distractions, checking your phone, making plans, are tools your brain uses to suppress the unresolvable truth that everything ends. But this reflex also steals clarity. By pushing mortality out of view, you lose urgency and perspective. Awareness of this suppression can transform how you live. Next time the thought surfaces, don't look away. Sit with it for a moment. In that brief stillness, you might discover not terror, but a reason to cherish everything you usually take for granted. What if the reason you feel uneasy when your routine is interrupted isn't just habit, but an ancient alarm system? Imagine your mind as a map maker, using rituals to chart a stable reality. This is the ritual completion bias, the instinct that unfinished routines mean something is wrong. When you repeat the same actions, morning coffee, locking the door, checking messages, your brain marks them as proof the world is predictable. Each ritual signals that nothing dangerous has changed. But when a ritual breaks, your threat detection systems light up. Even a small disruption can create a sense of unease you can't quite explain. Neuroscientists have discovered that completing routines soothes the caudate nucleus, a brain region tied to habit and security. The act of finishing what you started calms uncertainty. That's why leaving tasks unfinished or skipping familiar steps can feel strangely distressing, even if you know logically it doesn't matter. Think about how you feel when you can't follow your usual morning pattern. Your mind keeps tugging at the missing piece, trying to resolve it. To soften the bias, practice sitting with the discomfort of an incomplete ritual. Remind yourself that safety isn't always tied to repetition. Imagine holding a secret so potent it feels like a weight pressing on your chest. No one knows, yet your body behaves as if the truth itself is watching you. This is the secrecy reinforcement reflex, a neural loop that marks hidden information with chemical tension. Neuroscientists have found that suppressing secrets activates the anterior cingulate cortex and amygdala, regions linked to error detection and fear. Your brain interprets concealment as a threat, triggering cortisol that builds over time. That's why secrets feel heavier the longer you carry them. In studies, participants asked to keep personal secrets reported, feeling isolated, fatigued, and physically burdened. Some even estimated hills as steeper and distances as longer, as if their bodies were compensating for invisible weight. The compulsion to confess isn't just about morality, it's about relieving this biochemical stress. Marketers and interrogators exploit this reflex by creating safe spaces for disclosure, knowing that the brain's urge to unburden will override caution. The irony is, your survival wiring once relied on selective secrecy to avoid punishment or exile, yet too much concealment triggers the same circuits that scream danger. Next time you feel your heart race around a truth you can't share, pause. Notice the tension tightening your muscles. You're not weak for craving relief, you're human, carrying an ancient system designed to protect you by making hidden truths feel urgent. Recognizing this doesn't erase the pressure, but it can help you see it for what it is, a biological signal that the burden has become too heavy to bear alone. Imagine you start learning a new skill, a language, a musical instrument, or a strategy game. After just a few lessons, you feel a surge of confidence, convinced you've grasped essentials. This is the learning curve shortcut, your brain's reflex to reward early understanding and trick you into believing you've mastered something far more complex. In ancestral environments, quick comprehension meant survival. If you could rapidly spot patterns in animal behavior or terrain, you stayed alive. The brain evolved to flood you with dopamine at the first sign of progress, reinforcing the illusion that you've seen the whole picture. Neuroscientists call this the Dunning-Kruger effect. Novices consistently overestimate their knowledge because their limited grasp prevents them from seeing what they don't know. For example, studies show that beginners often rate their skills higher than intermediates, who have learned enough to recognize the gaps in their understanding. This bias is why early success can become a trap. When insight feels easy, you stop questioning assumptions and miss the deeper layers of complexity. The paradox is that the same instinct that drives curiosity also fuels overconfidence. You think you've conquered the mountain when you've only reached the first ledge. Recognizing this shortcut doesn't mean you'll never fall for it again, but it helps you pause and ask what you might be missing. The next time you feel certain you understand something fully after only a brief exposure. Remember, your brain loves quick victories, even if the truth is far more intricate. Imagine slipping into a suit or a uniform. Instantly, you stand taller, your voice deepens, and you feel more capable, even if nothing else has changed. This is the clothing identity encoding, a neurological reflex that links what you wear to who you believe you are. Long before fashion became personal expression, clothing signaled status, role, and tribe. Your ancestors recognized allies and threats by the furs, colors, or symbols they displayed. Over generations, your brain evolved to treat garments as cues to adjust behavior. Modern studies prove this effect isn't just psychological, it's physiological. In one experiment, participants wearing a white lab coat performed better on attention tasks, simply because they associated the garment with intelligence and focus. Another study found that people dressed formally felt more powerful and were more willing to take risks. Even casual clothes have archetypes woven into them. A hoodie can trigger feelings of comfort and invisibility. A tailored outfit can summon confidence and authority. Your posture shifts. Your tone changes. The clothing identity. Encoding can be empowering, but it can also limit you. If you believe certain clothes define your worth, you may feel diminished when you don't wear them. Think about the last time you hesitated to act boldly because you didn't feel dressed for it. That wasn't vanity. It was ancient wiring equating appearance with identity. The next time you put on anything, pause and notice the reflex. Are you choosing your clothes, or are they choosing your mindset? Awareness of this encoding allows you to dress as a conscious act of self-definition, not just habit. Imagine you lift the lid of a forgotten container in your fridge. The smell hits you first, then the sight, fuzzy mold spreading in fractal patterns. Instantly, your stomach tightens, your face twists, and you pull back. This is the contamination avoidance circuit. Your brain isn't reacting out of politeness or squeamishness. It's executing an ancient hygiene protocol designed to keep you alive. Disgust evolved as a protective force against pathogens long before humans understood germs. Researchers have mapped this response to regions like the insular cortex, which generates a visceral, automatic rejection when you encounter potential sources of infection, rotting food, bodily fluids, parasites. Even the thought of contamination can trigger this reflex. That's why people feel ill reading descriptions of decay or watching graphic images. Your nervous system doesn't wait for analysis. It delivers a clear command: distance yourself now. This instinct also shapes culture and morality. Anthropologists have found that concepts of purity and taboo often trace back to disease avoidance. Ritual hand-washing, burial practices, and dietary rules emerged from the same primal circuitry. But the reflex isn't perfect. Sometimes it overreaches, fueling stigma toward harmless differences. Awareness of this circuit allows you to distinguish real risk from irrational aversion. Next time you feel disgust rising, pause and ask, is this reaction protecting me or simply echoing ancient fears? In that moment, you reclaim the power to choose your response consciously. What if the reason you feel uneasy leaving home without your favorite ring, bag, or phone isn't really about needing them? Imagine your mind as a threat detector, constantly scanning for ways to feel anchored. This is the protective object attachment, the instinct to assign ordinary items the role of psychological totems. In early human history, carrying a familiar object could mean survival. A tool, a charm, or a weapon offered security. Over time, your brain evolved to treat certain possessions as extensions of your safety. Even when the danger isn't real, the feeling is. That's why your phone feels like more than technology. It's a protective tether. Losing it triggers the same stress circuits as losing shelter or community. You might rationalize that it's about convenience, but deep down, it's about reassurance. Studies show that holding a cherished object lowers cortisol, the stress hormone, and calms the limbic system. Your mind reads the weight and feel of it as proof you're prepared. Think about the last time you forgot something important. The unease wasn't just inconvenience. It was your brain warning you that your safety net was missing. Next time you notice this attachment, pause. Ask yourself, is this object truly essential, or is it a symbol my mind clings to for comfort? Imagine talking to someone with an unfamiliar accent, and before you realize it, your own speech starts to shift. Your vowels soften, your tone adjusts, even your vocabulary morphs to match theirs. This is the speech conformity trigger, a subconscious reflex that evolved as social camouflage. Neuroscientists have found that your brain's mirror neuron system lights up when you hear someone speak, priming you to imitate their patterns. This mimicry once helped early humans blend into groups, reducing the risk of exile or attack. In modern life, it happens without effort. Studies show that people unconsciously adjust their pitch and speech rate within seconds of a conversation starting. You might notice yourself adopting slang after spending time with a friend, or slipping into formal language around authority figures. This reflex isn't manipulation, it's survival coding. Mirroring creates rapport and signals belonging, which your brain interprets as safety. Marketers and negotiators exploit this instinct by deliberately matching your speech, making you feel understood and more likely to agree. The irony is, the more you value individuality, the more uncomfortable you might feel when you notice yourself blending in. But this doesn't make you inauthentic. It makes you human. Next time you catch your voice changing, pause. Feel the subtle pull toward harmony. Recognize that ancient circuitry is guiding you to adapt, to be accepted, to stay connected. You're not weak for wanting to fit in. You're wired for it. And in a world where isolation once meant death, this reflex was the difference between survival and being left behind. Imagine you walk into a crowded room, and before you've even found a seat, Your mind has already pinpointed the exits. You might not notice it happening, but your eyes flick to the doorways, the windows, the paths that lead out. This is the exit awareness reflex, an ancient survival mechanism that never stops scanning for escape routes. For early humans, knowing how to flee was as important as knowing how to fight. If danger erupted, a predator, a rival, a fire, the difference between life and death was how fast you could run. Neuroscientists have discovered that your brain's amygdala and hippocampus constantly map spaces for potential exits, even when you feel safe. In studies using eye tracking technology, participants' gazes gravitate toward doors within milliseconds of entering a room. This reflex operates below conscious awareness, part of your ambient threat detection system. For example, you might feel uneasy sitting with your back to an open space because your mind can't monitor all the escape routes. This bias is why people often choose seats facing the door in restaurants or keep their backs to the wall in public places. The paradox is that this instinct, once crucial, can now fuel anxiety and hypervigilance. You feel the need to check and recheck your exits, even when there's no real danger. Recognizing this reflex doesn't mean you can turn it off, but it helps you see it for what it is, your nervous system trying to keep you alive. The next time you catch yourself scanning the room, remember, your brain was built to escape first and ask questions later. Imagine sitting on the couch, knowing you should get up and exercise or tackle a project, yet feeling an invisible weight holding you down. This isn't just laziness, it's the energy hoarding instinct, an ancient reflex that treats every calorie as a precious survival resource. Long before modern abundance, your ancestors lived in environments where food was unpredictable and effort had to be rationed carefully. Moving without a clear payoff could mean wasting energy you'd never get back. Your brain evolved to calculate whether any action was worth the expenditure. Even today, when you have plenty, the same wiring runs silently beneath your decisions. Neuroscientists have shown that when you consider exerting yourself, your brain's insular cortex evaluates potential energy cost versus benefit. If no immediate reward is visible, it sends signals to slow you down, making procrastination feel strangely justified. This instinct once kept you alive during scarcity, but now it can sabotage growth, health, and ambition. Think about the last time you avoided a workout or delayed a task you knew would help you. That wasn't weakness alone, it was your survival brain protecting its reserves. The energy hoarding instinct also explains why small, clear goals feel easier to tackle than vague ambitions. Specific rewards help override the bias toward conserving effort. The next time you feel that heavy resistance to action, pause and ask, is this truly necessary rest, or an outdated reflex keeping me small? Awareness of this instinct allows you to choose purposeful effort over unconscious preservation. Imagine you make a small mistake, forgetting a name, dropping your keys, and instantly, a voice in your mind begins to speak. Maybe it says, "You're so careless," or maybe it soothes you, "It's okay, everyone slips up." This is the inner voice dominance. Your decisions, confidence, and resilience all hinge on the tone of this running commentary. Neuroscientists have found that your brain treats internal speech almost like an external command. When you berate yourself, your body reacts with stress hormones as if someone else is attacking you. The anterior cingulate cortex lights up, monitoring errors and triggering anxiety. Over time, a critical voice becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You hesitate to try new things, expecting failure. You shrink under imagined judgment, but when your inner voice is kind, your brain responds with calm. The parasympathetic system slows your heartbeat. You recover faster from setbacks and trust yourself to keep going. Studies show that self-compassion isn't indulgence, it's a performance enhancer. Athletes, leaders, and creators who practice gentle self-talk sustain motivation longer and bounce back higher. Yet most people never question the tone of their monologue. They assume it's the truth, when it's often just an echo of past criticism. Awareness can interrupt the cycle. Next time your voice turns cruel, pause. Ask, would I speak this way to someone I love? If not, you've found the first step to changing it. What if the reason you start believing something isn't the evidence, but how many times you've heard it? Imagine your mind as an echo chamber where repetition becomes truth. This is the repetition familiarity loop, the phenomenon where familiarity hijacks belief even when your logic protests. When you encounter a statement over and over, your brain starts to process it more fluently. That ease of processing feels comfortable and comfort feels true. Psychologists call this the illusory truth effect. It's why slogans, rumors, and advertising work so well. Think about a catchy phrase you've heard 100 times. Even if you know it's exaggerated, a part of you still feels it must be partly real. Your neurons have wired it in through sheer exposure. This loop isn't about intelligence, it's about efficiency. Your brain evolved to prefer familiar information because in the past, repetition often signaled reliability. If everyone in your tribe repeated a warning, ignoring it could be fatal. But today, this reflex can distort your perception. Repetition alone can overpower critical thinking, making you trust ideas that don't deserve it. To break the loop, slow down when something feels instantly convincing. Ask, do I believe this because it's true, or just because it's familiar? Imagine crossing an item off your to-do list. A small task, maybe folding laundry or replying to a message. Yet instantly, you feel lighter, almost triumphant. This is the goal completion euphoria, a neurochemical celebration your brain releases to reward closure. Neuroscientists have found that finishing a goal triggers a surge of dopamine, the neurotransmitter that fuels motivation and pleasure. Your brain evolved this response because completing tasks once meant survival. Gathering food, building shelter, securing safety. Each success reinforced behavior that kept you alive. Today, that circuitry remains unchanged. Studies show that even trivial accomplishments can reduce anxiety and increase confidence. This is why apps and games exploit micro-goals, awarding you badges and progress bars to create an illusion of progress that hooks your biology. The Zeigarnik effect explains why unfinished tasks create mental tension, a constant hum of discomfort that only completion can silence. Your mind craves closure as a form of control in an unpredictable world. The irony is, sometimes you chase low-stakes tasks simply to feel that rush, avoiding bigger goals because the small wins feel safer. Next time you feel euphoria after checking a box, pause. Recognize the ancient reflex celebrating survival, even when the stakes are small. You're not silly for feeling joy over mundane achievements. You're human, carrying a brain designed to reward any step that moves you toward certainty. That little burst of triumph isn't trivial. It's a primal echo reminding you that, for a moment, you finished something that once could have meant everything. Imagine you catch your reflection in a shop window, and for a moment, an unexpected calm washes over you. You weren't trying to admire yourself, but seeing your own face brings a strange reassurance. This is the self-face reassurance reflex, an ancient mechanism that helps your brain confirm you still exist. In early human history, recognizing your own reflection wasn't about vanity, it was about survival. Your face was the most immediate proof that you were alive and intact. Neuroscientists have found that when you see your own face, your brain's medial prefrontal cortex lights up, activating circuits tied to self-awareness and emotional regulation. Even brief glimpses can reduce anxiety, as if your mind is checking a vital signal. For example, studies show that people experiencing dissociation or panic feel more grounded when they look into a mirror. The reflection acts like an anchor, reminding them of their continuity and presence. This reflex also explains why you might feel compelled to glance at your reflection before a stressful event, not out of narcissism, but because it soothes a primal fear of losing yourself. The paradox is that something as simple as a mirror can momentarily quiet the background hum of existential uncertainty. Recognizing this reflex doesn't mean you need to avoid mirrors, but it helps you appreciate why they can feel oddly comforting. The next time you find yourself reassured by your own reflection, remember, your brain is checking in to confirm you're still here, still real, still part of the story unfolding around you. Imagine watching someone slam their finger in a door. For a split second, you wince, your body recoils, and you feel a phantom echo of their pain. This is the empathy trigger code, a neural reflex that makes you experience another's suffering almost as if it were your own. At the heart of this phenomenon are mirror neurons, specialized brain cells discovered in the 1990s. These neurons fire both when you perform an action and when you witness someone else doing it. They create a shared simulation, blending your perspective with theirs. Evolution shaped this reflex because, in early human groups, survival depended on attuning to each other's distress. If a member of your tribe was injured or afraid, feeling their pain increased the chance you would help, and in return, you'd be helped when it was your turn to suffer. Modern research shows that mirror neurons don't just trigger emotional empathy, they can also produce measurable physical responses. Your heart rate can spike, your skin can flush, and pain-sensitive areas of your brain can activate as if you've been wounded. Think about the last time you cringed at someone else's injury or felt tears watching a stranger's grief. That wasn't imagination. It was your ancient empathy circuitry lighting up. The empathy trigger code is what allows humans to build bonds, trust, and compassion. But it can also overwhelm you, blurring the line between your pain and theirs. The next time you feel another's hurt in your own body, pause and honor this gift. It means you are wired to care, and that caring is humanity's oldest strength. Imagine you're watching a series finale, and the story cuts to black before the mystery is solved. You feel a sharp frustration, an almost physical tension. This is the hooked expectation cycle. Your brain craves resolution the way your body craves food. When you encounter an incomplete loop, a question without an answer, a story without an ending, your mind automatically searches for closure. Neuroscientists have found that the anterior cingulate cortex and hippocampus activate when you're presented with unfinished information. This activation creates an uncomfortable mental itch, a readiness to keep processing until the loop is closed. It's called the Zeigarnik effect. People remember incomplete tasks more vividly than completed ones. This wiring once helped our ancestors track important goals. If you forgot which traps were set or which disputes were unresolved, survival was at risk. Today, this same reflex fuels binge watching, compulsive scrolling, and late-night rabbit holes. Cliffhangers and teasers hijack your attention by exploiting the brain's fear of unfinished business. Even in daily life, you feel this tension when someone says, "Remind me to tell you something later." Awareness of the hooked expectation cycle gives you a choice. You can pause, notice the discomfort, and ask, "Does this loop really deserve my time?" In that moment, you reclaim your focus from a reflex that evolved to keep you safe, but now keeps you chasing endless endings. What if the reason you feel instantly comfortable in some rooms isn't the decor, but an old imprint buried in your mind? Imagine your childhood living spaces quietly shaping what feels safe to you forever. This is the familiar furniture bias, the tendency to feel at ease in layouts that echo your earliest environments. Your brain doesn't just store memories as events, it encodes the spatial arrangement around them. The placement of chairs, the angle of a lamp, the way a doorway opens. These become emotional anchors linked to a time when you felt secure or loved. Years later, when you enter a room with a similar setup, your nervous system recognizes the pattern before your conscious mind does. The familiarity lowers your stress and makes you feel you belong. Studies in environmental psychology show that spatial memories are surprisingly durable. Even decades later, they can trigger calm or unease without clear explanation. Think about a hotel or cafe where you felt immediately relaxed. Chances are it mirrored some detail of the spaces where you grew up. This bias isn't weakness, it's your brain's way of scanning for safety cues, but it can also keep you clinging to the past without knowing why. To understand yourself more fully, notice what spaces you gravitate toward and ask, what old comfort am I recreating here? Imagine someone shouting nonsense at you, Random words with no meaning, yet your heart rate spikes and your attention locks in. This is the vocal volume decoder at work. Loudness hijacks the brain's primitive alarm circuits that evolved to detect threats. A loud voice signals urgency, dominance, and danger, even when the message itself is empty. Studies show that in arguments, volume alone can make ideas seem more credible. In one experiment, participants rated loud statements as more convincing than quiet ones, regardless of logic. Politicians and salespeople exploit this, using raised voices to override your critical thinking. The brain processes volume in the amygdala before rational areas can analyze content. This is why crowds chanting can feel persuasive or frightening, even if the words are nonsense. Imagine a fire drill siren. It forces your body into action, overriding thought. Loudness does the same. It's a primal shortcut. If something is loud, it must be important. Children learn this reflex early, responding faster to shouting than calm speech. In relationships, yelling can manipulate emotions, making you feel attacked or cornered. Even music producers use volume shifts to trigger excitement or tension. Your brain is wired to obey volume, a vulnerability hidden in plain sight. Next time someone raises their voice, notice the automatic surge in adrenaline and the urge to comply or defend. Recognizing this response is the first step to reclaiming control over your perception. Loudness doesn't mean truth. It only means your nervous system has been tricked into submission. Imagine you're talking to someone, and before they even open their mouth, your attention drifts to where their eyes are pointing. You probably don't realize you're doing it. This is the eye direction decoder, your brain's ancient reflex to scan for hidden threats or concealed intentions before you process language. In early human groups, survival depended on knowing where danger might erupt. If someone's gaze darted to the shadows or over your shoulder, that glance could mean a predator was near or a rival was preparing an attack. Neuroscientists have found that specialized neurons in your superior temporal sulcus track eye movement with astonishing speed, triggering the amygdala to flag potential risks. Even today, studies show that you judge sincerity and safety within milliseconds based on where another person looks. For example, when someone avoids your gaze or glances around nervously, your body tenses before you consciously register suspicion. This reflex is so deeply embedded that you often feel discomfort when someone's eyes don't match their words. The paradox is that what once protected you can now breed anxiety in harmless situations. You might sense deception where there is none, simply because their eye movements don't fit your brain's ancient pattern map. Recognizing this instinct doesn't mean you can shut it off, but it helps you question whether your first impression is accurate or just a survival script echoing from the past. The next time you catch yourself scanning someone's gaze before you hear their voice, remember, your mind is still searching for threats in a world mostly free of predators. Imagine the sun dipping below the horizon. As darkness settles, you feel a subtle heaviness in your mind, a reluctance to make decisions, an urge to retreat and wait for daylight. This is the nightfall safety shutdown, an ancient neural reflex that lowers your executive function as the light disappears. Long before electricity, humans survived by respecting the boundary between day and night. Darkness meant predators were near, visibility was limited, and the cost of mistakes was higher. To protect you, your brain evolved to conserve energy and avoid risk when the sun went down. Neuroscientists have shown that circadian rhythms don't just govern sleep, they also regulate cognitive performance. As evening progresses, your prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for planning and decision-making, becomes less active. Meanwhile, areas linked to emotion and threat detection stay alert. That's why worries feel amplified and choices feel heavier after sunset. You're not imagining it. Your brain is deliberately downshifting into a safer, more cautious mode. Think about the last time you tried to solve a big problem late at night and felt paralyzed by indecision. That wasn't weakness. It was your ancient wiring trying to keep you safe. The nightfall safety shutdown can be helpful, prompting you to rest and recharge. But it can also convince you to see ordinary challenges as insurmountable threats. The next time you feel that weight settling on your thoughts after dark, pause and remember, this is your survival code, not the truth of your situation. Awareness of this shutdown allows you to wait until morning, when clarity returns with the light. Imagine you wake up feeling irritable for no clear reason. A small inconvenience, spilled coffee, a late message, sets off a reaction that feels justified. But what if the trigger wasn't the event, but your biology? This is the chemical mood override. Long before your conscious mind weaves a story, hormones flood your system, shifting perception and behavior. Cortisol surges during stress, narrowing focus and amplifying threats. Dopamine rises in anticipation, making rewards feel magnetic. Oxytocin softens your defenses, creating warmth and trust. Each chemical bath changes your experience of reality. Neuroscientists have shown that when hormonal states shift, your brain doesn't just feel different, it reinterprets facts to match the mood. You act from imbalance, then build rationalizations on top. This is why a calm discussion can turn into an argument without warning, or why you suddenly feel certain that someone is against you. The story arrives later, retrofitted to make sense of the chemistry. Even your memories can warp to match your current state. Researchers call this mood-congruent recall. When you're sad, you remember past failures more vividly. When you're content, you recall triumphs. Awareness of the chemical mood override is a kind of superpower. Next time a wave of certainty hits, pause and ask, is this truth or just the echo of hormones? In that space, you reclaim the freedom to respond instead of react. What if the reason you keep walking the same path isn't efficiency, but a hidden survival reflex? Imagine your mind as a trail carver, laying down grooves of safety every time you repeat a route. This is the safe path reinforcement, the tendency to favor familiar ways even when better options exist. When you retrace your steps, your brain rewards you with a sense of certainty. Each repetition strengthens neural circuits that link the path to safety. Over time, those circuits become so efficient they feel like instinct. You don't question why you avoid the shortcut or the unknown street. You just feel a subtle pull back to the trail you trust. This reflex once kept early humans alive. Predictable routes reduced the risk of predators or hidden threats. But in modern life, it can limit growth. You stick to routines not because they're optimal, but because they're neurologically comfortable. Studies in behavioral neuroscience show that repeating a path lowers cortisol, the stress hormone, even if the route is longer or less practical. Your nervous system prioritizes known over efficient. To break this pattern, consciously choose a new way, even in small moments. Over time, you can teach your brain that novelty isn't danger, it's possibility waiting to be explored. Imagine standing at a crossroads, knowing one path might bring incredible rewards, yet you hesitate, frozen by a single question. What if I regret this? This is the regret aversion bias, a hidden force shaping your every decision. Neuroscientists have discovered that your brain is more terrified of future regret than of actual failure. Even when success is likely, you default to the safer option just to avoid the torment of wondering what could have been. In studies, people consistently pass up lucrative opportunities if they fear the pain of hindsight. A gambler will walk away after small gains, not because they are satisfied, but because losing what they won feels worse than never winning at all. Entrepreneurs delay launching ideas, terrified that a wrong move will haunt them. Even in relationships, you might stay in something unfulfilling simply because ending it risks the regret of loneliness. The prefrontal cortex, which simulates future scenarios, conspires with the amygdala, which stores emotional memories, to create a vivid movie of imagined regret. This movie feels so real, you'd rather not play the game at all. Recognizing this bias is essential. Regret is a teacher, but fear of regret is a jailer. Every time you avoid action to stay safe from remorse, you shrink your life a little more. Next time you feel the pull to avoid risk, ask yourself whether you're protecting your future or surrendering it to a phantom that only exists in your mind. Imagine you open a closet and spot an old stuffed animal or a worn blanket from childhood. You pick it up, and without meaning to, a quiet sense of safety settles over you. This is the comfort item return loop, your nervous system's ancient reflex to bind security to familiar objects. In early human life, survival meant finding consistent cues of safety. Infants clung to a parent's scent or the feeling of a soft covering. Over time, those sensations wired into their developing brains as signals that everything was okay. Neuroscientists have discovered that touching a cherished object activates the insular cortex and reduces stress markers like cortisol. Even as an adult, your brain interprets these items as evidence that you're not alone, that you've endured. For example, studies show that people who hold a childhood toy during anxiety-inducing situations experience measurable drops in heart rate and blood pressure. The comfort isn't just nostalgia, it's your biology reinforcing a learned association. The paradox is that while you may feel embarrassed about keeping these relics, they're serving a real, functional purpose. They act like a bridge between who you were and who you are, grounding you when life feels uncertain. Recognizing this reflex doesn't mean you have to discard these objects to prove maturity. It simply helps you see why they matter so much. The next time you find yourself reaching for something from your past, remember, your brain isn't being sentimental. It's revisiting a proven safety signal that once kept you calm enough to survive. Imagine sharing something personal, only to feel a wave of discomfort rise in your chest. Almost without thinking, you crack a joke. Everyone laughs, the tension dissolves, and no one asks any deeper questions. This is the defensive humor reflex, a hidden survival strategy that uses laughter as a shield. From an evolutionary perspective, vulnerability once meant danger. Revealing weakness in a small tribe could invite ridicule, loss of status, or even exclusion. To protect yourself, your brain learned to camouflage sincerity with humor. Neuroscientists have found that self-deprecating jokes activate the brain's reward centers, flooding you with relief and a sense of social safety. In one study, people who joked about their own mistakes were rated as more likable and less threatening, reducing the chance of confrontation. But this reflex doesn't just protect you, it also keeps you hidden. Every time you deflect serious topics with humor, you trade authenticity for safety. Think about the last time you laughed off an insecurity or turned pain into a punchline. That wasn't weakness, it was your ancient wiring trying to protect your heart. The defensive humor reflex works because it signals to others, "Don't aim here. I already know this is a soft spot." Over time, though, it can become a barrier that prevents real connection. The next time you feel the urge to joke when you're exposed, pause and ask, "Am I using humor to share or to hide?" Awareness of this reflex allows you to choose when to laugh and when to simply be seen. Imagine you wake up and immediately reach for your phone, filling the room with music, podcasts, or news. It feels like comfort, but often it's camouflage. This is the background noise control. Your brain instinctively uses noise to drown out the volume of your own thoughts. Silence has a way of magnifying the inner monologue, old regrets, unfinished plans, hidden fears. Neuroscientists have found that when external input drops, the default mode network in your brain becomes highly active, generating self-referential chatter. While this process is crucial for reflection and problem solving, it can also trigger discomfort. That's why so many people keep a constant soundtrack: the hum of a TV, the rhythm of a playlist, the murmur of a crowd. In studies where subjects sat in silence without distraction, many preferred even mild electric shocks over being alone with their thoughts. Noise becomes a shield, a soft barrier against introspection that feels too raw. But this habit also carries a cost. When you never let your mind settle, you lose the chance to process, integrate, and release what's unresolved. The background noise becomes a prison of pleasant avoidance. Awareness is the first key. Next time you feel compelled to fill the silence, pause. Ask yourself, what am I trying not to hear? In that question, you reclaim the power to sit with your mind unshielded, and maybe discover that your thoughts are more survivable than you imagined. What if the reason you spend so much time arranging pillows and blankets isn't just about comfort? Imagine your mind as an ancient animal scanning the environment for safety before it can rest. This is the nesting impulse routine, the reflex to build a protective barrier around your body before you sleep. Long before humans had bedrooms, our ancestors created nests to shield themselves from predators and cold. The impulse to gather materials and shape a secure space is millions of years old. Even today, your brain feels more at ease when surrounded by soft boundaries. That's why you pile blankets on one side, tuck pillows around your back, or keep familiar objects close to the bed. It's not decoration, it's an instinctive defense. Neurobiologists have found that arranging a nest lowers activity in the amygdala, the brain's alarm center. Only when this part relaxes does your nervous system allow deep sleep. Think about how uneasy you feel trying to rest in a sterile or unfamiliar place. Without your nest, your brain stays partially alert, scanning for threats it can't see. The next time you find yourself building a cocoon of cushions, remember, you're honoring an ancient survival script. You're proving to your deepest instincts that here, at least, you are safe enough to let go. Imagine lying in bed, mind racing with the one email you forgot to send, the call you didn't return, the task you promised you'd finish. This is the unfinished task recall, the brain's relentless way of keeping open loops alive. Psychologists call it the Zeigarnik effect. Unfinished activities occupy more mental space than completed ones. Your brain evolved this habit as a survival mechanism. If you left traps unset or shelters half-built, your life was at risk, so incomplete actions became mental alarms. Even today, this system hijacks your focus. A single unchecked box on a to-do list can feel louder than everything you accomplished. Students remember uncompleted assignments longer than finished ones. Servers in restaurants recall active orders, but forget them once delivered. This constant background buzz of the unfinished makes you feel restless, like something vital is slipping through your fingers. Marketers exploit this bias by creating cliffhangers, unresolved stories, and progress bars that demand closure. Your mind equates completion with safety, so it will loop the thought until you act. Recognizing this reflex allows you to diffuse its power. Writing down unfinished tasks can quiet the mental alarm. Closure is not just productivity, it's psychological relief. Next time you feel haunted by incomplete work, remember your brain is trying to protect you, but you are safe, even if some loops remain open. Imagine you're wrestling with a problem, and suddenly, a perfect solution snaps into place in your mind. A surge of excitement floods your body, and for a moment, you feel absolutely certain you've discovered something profound. This is the flash of insight addiction, your brain's powerful craving for sudden clarity. Neuroscientists have found that aha moments release a cocktail of dopamine and norepinephrine, chemicals that reward you for connecting dots. Evolution favored this wiring because quick pattern recognition could mean the difference between life and death. If you realized in an instant that certain tracks led to danger or that a plant was safe to eat, you survived. But in modern life, this reflex can become a trap. Studies show that the rush of insight doesn't necessarily correlate with accuracy. Just because an idea feels true doesn't mean it is. For example, researchers have observed that people are more likely to believe conspiracy theories if they arrive in a single, vivid flash of understanding. The brain interprets novelty and emotional intensity as proof. This is why you can get hooked on chasing new frameworks, constantly discarding old ones in favor of the next epiphany. The paradox is that while insight feels like revelation, it's often just the brain rewarding itself for novelty. Recognizing this instinct doesn't mean you have to distrust every idea, but it helps you pause before declaring it absolute truth. The next time an answer erupts in your mind, remember, your brain loves the feeling of sudden certainty, whether it's accurate or not. Imagine catching yourself repeating a phrase you swore you'd never use, only to realize it sounds exactly like something your parent once said. This is the lineage behavior echo, a hidden force that shapes your habits, gestures, and beliefs without conscious permission. Long before modern families, early humans survived by copying the most successful members of their group. Parents and elders were the tribe's leaders, and mimicking their behavior increased the odds you'd belong and survive. Your brain evolved specialized neural circuits to record and replay these patterns automatically. Neuroscientists have shown that mirror neurons don't just fire when you observe strangers. They activate most powerfully when you watch people you know intimately. Over time, you internalize their posture, tone of voice, and emotional reactions as default settings. This is why you might tense your shoulders during stress, just like your father, or use your mother's exact facial expression when you're worried. It's not logic. It's inherited mimicry designed to maintain social cohesion. Think about the last time you heard yourself say something and felt an eerie familiarity. That wasn't imagination. It was your lineage echo surfacing. While these patterns can offer comfort and continuity, they can also limit you, trapping you in cycles you never chose. The next time you notice a habit that feels borrowed, pause and ask, is this truly mine or something I absorbed without question? Awareness of the lineage behavior. Echo allows you to decide which inherited scripts deserve to stay and which ones you're finally ready to rewrite. Imagine you enter a beautiful room, sunlight spilling across polished floors, art on the walls, fresh flowers by the window, yet your eyes dart straight to a tiny crack in the plaster. This is the fault scanning reflex. Your brain evolved to notice what's wrong before it appreciates what's right. In our ancestral environment, overlooking a threat, a snake in the grass, a spoiled food source, could be fatal. So the amygdala developed a negative bias, priming you to search for danger or defect before beauty. Neuroscientists have shown that negative information produces stronger and longer-lasting neural responses than positive details. This vigilance once kept you alive, but in modern life, it becomes a lens that colors everything in grayscale. You fixate on the flaw in your reflection instead of the kindness in your eyes, the single criticism in a sea of praise, the problem that overshadows every achievement. Relationships suffer as you scrutinize imperfections, assuming that finding faults equals being prepared. But awareness of this reflex creates choice. When you catch yourself scanning for flaws, pause. Ask, what beauty am I ignoring right now? What goodness am I minimizing? Retraining your attention doesn't mean pretending problems don't exist. It means balancing survival instincts with gratitude. Over time, you can teach your mind to see the whole picture, not just the cracks. And in that fuller vision, life becomes richer, softer, more true. What if your eyes aren't showing you the world as it is, but as you already believe it should be? Imagine your brain as a prediction engine, completing scenes before you even finish looking. This is the expectation filling code, the reflex to fill in sensory gaps with what you expect, not what's actually there. Neuroscientists have discovered that perception isn't passive recording, it's active construction. Your brain uses stored models and past experiences to guess what should appear next. These predictions arrive faster than conscious thought, shaping what you see and hear before logic has a chance to intervene. That's why you can read a sentence with missing letters or recognize a blurry face in a crowd. Your mind rushes to fill the blanks. But this shortcut comes at a cost. It can make you blind to details that don't fit your expectations. Think about how easily you miss changes in a familiar room or overlook errors in something you've read many times. Your brain prefers speed over precision. To see more clearly, pause when you feel certain. Ask yourself, am I observing or just confirming what I already assume? Awareness breaks the loop. Imagine standing at a deserted crosswalk in the middle of the night. No cars, no cameras, yet you wait for the light to turn green before you step forward. This is the rule obedience drift. the hidden reflex that keeps you compliant when no one is watching. Neuroscientists have found that following rules isn't always about fear of punishment. Your brain craves predictable structure to reduce the mental strain of endless decisions. Every guideline and regulation becomes a shortcut, sparing you the energy of constant choice. In experiments, people kept obeying arbitrary rules long after authority figures left the room. Even children will line up or take turns without supervision, simply because order feels safer than chaos. This reflex is so strong that it shapes culture itself. Rituals, customs, and etiquette all thrive because your mind finds relief in them. The prefrontal cortex, which handles planning, works with the anterior cingulate cortex, which monitors conflict, to keep you aligned with expected behavior. Marketers know this and design experiences with clear rules to guide your actions effortlessly. Think of signs, arrows, instructions. Each one reduces friction. Recognizing this drift can be liberating. You can choose when to follow and when to question. Next time you feel compelled to obey a rule that serves no purpose, pause and ask whether you're avoiding danger or simply avoiding the discomfort of making your own choice. Rules can help, but blind adherence can shrink your freedom. Imagine you're under pressure, a deadline looms or conflict erupts, and without thinking, you hear yourself using the same words you once blurted out as a child. Maybe you curl up, pout, or feel the urge to hide. This is the childhood echo reflex, your nervous system's way of reactivating the oldest survival codes when stress hits. For early humans, learned patterns were stored early in life because they worked to keep you safe. When a child cried or withdrew, it often summoned protection. Those behaviors wired deeply into neural circuits as default responses. Neuroscientists have found that under threat, the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that governs rational thought, goes offline, while older emotional centers take over. This is why you can feel small or helpless in situations that logically don't warrant it. For example, studies show that people in high-stress negotiations revert to childhood speech patterns, including simpler words and defensive tones. Even your posture can regress, shoulders curling in like they once did when you were afraid of being scolded. The paradox is that these reactions are automatic. They aren't signs of weakness, but proof that your brain is trying to protect you using the earliest scripts it knows. Recognizing this reflex doesn't mean you can erase it, but it helps you respond with compassion instead of shame. The next time you catch yourself behaving like a younger version of you, remember, your mind is reaching back to strategies that once kept you safe, even if they no longer fit your grown life. Imagine pushing through exhaustion, telling yourself you'll rest later, only to find that later never comes. This is the burnout threshold loop, a survival code that once kept you alive but now drives you straight into collapse. In ancestral environments, endurance was everything. If you stopped hunting, building, or protecting your tribe, you risked losing everything. Your brain evolved to override fatigue with bursts of adrenaline and focus, rewarding you for pressing on. Neuroscientists have found that when you approach exhaustion, your nervous system releases stress hormones like cortisol, which temporarily mask pain and sharpen attention. This allowed early humans to outlast predators or survive emergencies. But in modern life, where deadlines and pressures never end, this same reflex becomes a trap. You ignore the signals, muscle tension, irritability, brain fog, believing you can handle just a little more. And when you finally stop, it's because you have no choice. Think about the last time you worked or worried yourself sick. That wasn't simply ambition. It was your ancestral code treating every challenge like a life or death test. The burnout threshold loop can make you feel proud of your stamina while quietly draining your health and joy. The next time you hear the voice telling you to keep going no matter what, pause and ask, is this truly necessary or just my survival reflex in overdrive? Awareness of this loop allows you to break the cycle before you reach the point of collapse. Rest is not a weakness. It's a skill your ancestors never had the luxury to learn, but you do. Imagine you're sitting quietly when a door slams or an alarm blares. Before you even register what the sound is, your whole body jolts, heart racing, breath caught, muscles tensed. This is the alarm response seizure. Your brain is wired to react to sudden noise faster than conscious thought. In our evolutionary past, unexpected sounds often meant danger, a predator, an enemy, a natural disaster. So the auditory pathways developed a shortcut straight to the amygdala, your threat detection center. This circuit triggers the sympathetic nervous system in milliseconds, launching adrenaline into your bloodstream. Your pupils dilate, your focus narrows, your body braces to fight, flee, or freeze. Neuroscientists call this an orienting response, an automatic redirection of attention and readiness. It's why you can feel foolish after jumping at a harmless noise, but your biology doesn't care about embarrassment. Survival always outranks dignity. Even once you realize there's no threat, it takes time for your system to reset. The cortisol lingers, making you edgy and alert. In modern life, alarms are everywhere. Car horns, phone notifications, breaking news. Each one tugs at this ancient reflex. Awareness can soften its grip. Next time your body locks up from a sudden sound, pause. Remind yourself, this is just the echo of old survival code. You are safe. You can breathe. And in that exhale, you reclaim control over a reaction older than language itself. What if the reason you swallow your opinions in a group isn't weakness, but ancient survival instinct? Imagine your ancestors living in tight-knit tribes where dissent could mean exclusion, and exclusion could mean death. This is the groupthink submission script, the reflex to trade truth for belonging. When you sense a group forming consensus, your brain triggers alarm signals if you stand apart. Studies show that the anterior cingulate cortex, which registers social pain, lights up when you risk disagreement. To avoid that pain, you silence your thoughts or convince yourself the majority must be right. It feels safer to merge with the crowd, even when you know the consensus is flawed. Psychologists call this conformity bias. It's why committees make cautious decisions and why bad ideas can spread unchallenged. Think about meetings where you stayed quiet or nodded along, even though your instincts said otherwise. Your nervous system chose acceptance over accuracy. But awareness can break the script. Next time you feel the pull to agree without conviction, pause. Ask yourself, am I choosing safety over honesty? Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is risk standing alone. Imagine waiting for test results, not knowing if your life is about to change. That gnawing dread is the fog of uncertainty panic. Neuroscientists have found that ambiguity activates the brain's threat circuits more intensely than clear danger. You crave resolution so badly that you'd rather hear bad news than no news at all. In studies, people reported more anxiety when they couldn't predict outcomes, even when the stakes were small. Your brain evolved this bias because uncertainty once meant you couldn't prepare or defend yourself. The amygdala and anterior cingulate cortex flood your body with stress hormones to force you to seek clarity. That's why cliffhangers feel unbearable and unfinished conversations haunt you. In relationships, this panic fuels jealousy and overthinking. When you don't know where you stand, your mind invents worst-case stories to fill the void. Marketers and politicians exploit this reflex by creating suspense that demands your attention. You are wired to chase certainty, no matter the cost. Recognizing this impulse is the first step to reclaiming your calm. When confusion sets in, pause before grasping at the nearest explanation. Not all questions have immediate answers, and rushing can lead you to false conclusions. Next time you feel that desperate urge to know, remember that uncertainty is not always your enemy. Sometimes it is simply space for truth to unfold in its own time. Learning to tolerate ambiguity is one of the rarest and most powerful skills you can master. Imagine you're sharing a meal with friends, and when it's time to divide the last piece, you instinctively cut it in half, even though you paid more or worked harder to prepare it. This is the token fairness reflex, your brain's deep commitment to splitting resources evenly, no matter how unequal the effort behind them. In early human groups, survival depended on cooperation. If one hunter hoarded all the meat, the group fractured and everyone became more vulnerable. Neuroscientists have found that the anterior insula activates strongly when you perceive unfairness, producing a visceral feeling of disgust or discomfort. Even small children will protest unequal splits, showing that the impulse for fairness appears long before cultural training. For example, studies have shown that monkeys will refuse a treat if they see another monkey receive a better one for the same task. Your brain evolved to prefer shared survival over individual gain, because resentment could quickly escalate to conflict and exile. The paradox is that this reflex sometimes overrides logic. You might split rewards evenly in situations where you contributed far more, or feel guilty when you receive an extra share you've actually earned. The fairness impulse feels noble, but it's also an ancient insurance policy to keep the tribe intact. Recognizing this instinct doesn't mean you must ignore it, but it helps you question whether fairness is serving you or simply soothing inherited fears. The next time you feel compelled to divide something exactly in half, remember, your brain is following a survival script older than civilization itself. Imagine picking up an ordinary coffee mug in a store. You're indifferent until you buy it. Suddenly, it feels special. If someone tried to take it, you'd defend it like it mattered. This is the ownership possession trigger, a deep cognitive reflex that instantly inflates the value of anything you call your own. Psychologists call this the endowment effect. In one landmark study, people who were given a simple object, like a pen or a mug, immediately valued it twice as high as those who didn't own it. Your brain doesn't wait for rational appraisal. It reclassifies the object as part of your identity. Neuroscientists have found that ownership activates regions linked to self-representation, including the medial prefrontal cortex. This is the same area that lights up when you think about your personality or your memories. Your mind blurs the line between what you have and who you are. That's why you feel an irrational attachment to old clothes you never wear, gadgets you've replaced, or even digital possessions like saved playlists. Think about the last time you argued over something trivial just because it was yours. That wasn't logic. It was your survival wiring treating ownership as a signal of safety and status. In ancient environments, what you possessed often determined whether you survived. The ownership possession trigger helped you protect resources, but today, it can make you cling to things you don't need. The next time you feel that surge of protectiveness, pause and ask, does this truly matter, or is my brain just doubling the value out of habit? Awareness lets you choose what to keep and what to release. Imagine you meet a stranger whose face feels oddly familiar. You can't place why, but you feel a subtle warmth, a soft pull of trust. This is the facial familiarity shortcut. Your brain evolved to recognize faces that resemble those in your tribe, because in our ancestral environment, survival often depended on belonging. Researchers have found that when you see a face sharing features with your kin or social group, similar bone structure, skin tone, eye shape, your brain's fusiform gyrus lights up with recognition, even if you've never met the person. This familiarity triggers the release of oxytocin, the bonding hormone, which softens suspicion and builds rapport. Evolution coded this shortcut to help you quickly sort friend from foe. In dangerous conditions, trusting those who looked like you increased cooperation and reduced conflict. But in modern life, this reflex becomes a quiet bias. It makes you unconsciously favor people who mirror your appearance, while distancing you from those who don't. Studies show that hiring decisions, legal judgments, and even romantic choices are shaped by this ancient pattern-matching instinct. Yet familiarity is not the same as merit or goodness. Awareness is the first antidote. Next time you feel an unearned sense of trust or comfort, pause. Ask, am I responding to this person's character or just to echoes of ancestral familiarity? In that question lies the chance to choose connection based on truth, not reflex. What if the reason you keep replaying old conversations in your mind isn't overthinking, but a survival reflex? Imagine your ancestors depending on every social exchange to secure food, alliances, or protection. This is the rehearsal ritual reflex, the instinct to mentally practice interactions because social mistakes once carried real danger. When you rehearse what you said or what you'll say next time, your brain isn't just spinning wheels. It's trying to prevent rejection. Neuroimaging studies show that the same regions involved in planning movements light up when you simulate dialogue. To your nervous system, rehearsing words is as vital as rehearsing actions. That's why you replay an argument hours later or script how you'll introduce yourself tomorrow. You're preparing for belonging, because belonging meant survival. But the reflex can also trap you in endless loops, rehearsing scenarios that never happen. Your mind clings to the illusion that more mental practice guarantees safety. Next time you catch yourself stuck in this cycle, pause. Ask, am I preparing, or am I just trying to control what can't be controlled? Awareness helps you step out of rehearsal and return to the present. Imagine reaching for your phone, unlocking it without thought, or driving to work and realizing you don't remember a single turn you made. This is the unconscious behavioral script, the invisible code that guides most of your life. Neuroscientists have discovered that up to 95% of your actions happen automatically, without deliberate choice. Your brain evolved this system to conserve energy and react faster to threats. The basal ganglia stores these routines, while the prefrontal cortex only steps in when something unexpected happens. Think of how you tie your shoes, brush your teeth, or react to someone raising their voice. These are rehearsed patterns running beneath awareness. Even complex social behaviors like smiling politely or avoiding eye contact are scripted responses to ancient survival needs. Marketers exploit this by designing environments that trigger habits without conscious approval. Supermarkets place familiar products at eye level because your autopilot brain will reach before your rational mind decides. Recognizing these scripts is like turning on a light in a hidden room. Each time you pause and ask why you are doing something, you create space to choose rather than repeat. Next time you catch yourself acting on reflex, remember, the script is not always written for your benefit. Sometimes, it is just an outdated survival program still pretending to keep you safe. The real freedom begins when you learn to question your own automatic patterns.